Chapter 210. After Tong Tong was done, I sat on the sofa and smiled at the two of them. Now that the black magic in your body has been removed, you can feel it. The two of them closed their eyes to sense it, and their faces instantly revealed ecstasy as they expressed their gratitude to me excitedly. I waved my hand, and the smile on my face slowly turned cold. You said that as long as I remove the black magic, I can agree to any condition, right? After hearing what I said, the smiles on their faces faded a little, but they still nodded at me. I didn't hide it and said directly, "The two of you betrayed the Metaphysics Society and are unfamiliar with the Nanyang Taoist faction. It will be hard for you to establish a foothold there. How about working for me in the future?" Xie Chenghua and Lu Chuanda's smiles became even more unnatural. After a while, the short and fat Lu Chuanda was the first to nod and say, "You're a young phoenix with 4 meridians. Your future accomplishments will definitely be far above ours. We won't be at a disadvantage if we work with you." After he expressed his stance, Xie Chenghua couldn't sit still anymore. He quickly nodded and said, "Old Lu is right. We won't be losing out if we work for you. However, the two of us used to be the leaders of a guild and have our own businesses. If we work for you, our businesses will be abandoned," he said hesitantly, but it was obvious that he was bargaining. I smiled and didn't leave any room for negotiation. I said directly, "I can give you a few days to go back and sell your businesses, then come find me. I'll say the ugly words first. If I can remove the black magic, then I can remove it. Both of your bodies have the black magic that I've placed in them." What? Both of them were taken aback, and their faces darkened in an instant. I didn't say anything and just sat there, looking at them with a smile. After being silent for a while, Lu Chuan sighed and nodded as though he had accepted his fate. He told me that he would settle his matters in a week and come find me. Xie Chenghua nodded helplessly and also asked for a week's time. With the threat of the black magic, the two of them finally gave in. After everything was settled, I let the two of them settle their own matters and agreed to meet here in a week's time. After they left, I put this incident aside and began to think about the trick that Azan had used today. After studying it for a long time, I still couldn't understand the evil power that had entered my body at the beginning. However, with this experience, I would be more prepared next time. It wouldn't be that easy to fall into that trap. As for whether they could win in the end, it would depend on who the Nanyang Dao sect would send out tomorrow. It was needless to say that he was weak, but if he was strong, he would most likely have to rely on his eyes to exert force. Pupil had consumed a lot of energy yesterday. Although she was replenished by the Yin soul in the jade bracelet, it was hard to say how much she could recover overnight. From the looks of it, tomorrow was destined to be a bitter battle. I couldn't help him with the recovery of his eyes. In the following time, I made some golden light talismans and pure yang fire talismans to replenish the energy I had consumed in the past few days. The next morning, I hurried to the Metaphysics Association to welcome the last battle. Just like yesterday, the Nanyang Dao sect had sent out a middle-aged man who practiced Nanyang sorcery. However, this time, he had more tattoos on his body. The tattoos even covered his face. Moreover, he was wearing a black cloak. He called himself Black Clothes Azan. In Thai, Azan meant magician, and white cloaks and black cloaks represented the difference between the righteous and evil sections. It was hard to imagine that the mysterious and evil old man in the white cloak yesterday was the righteous Azan. If the righteous Azan was like that, what would the black-cloaked Azan do today? I couldn't help but feel nervous. As soon as I stepped forward, I held a square sky fan in my hand. I wanted to use it first. However, this Azan was more polite than the white-cloaked Azan yesterday. He clasped his hands in front of his chest to greet me. Then, he used his broken Chinese to introduce himself. Aladi, the disciple of the Thai royal palace's master Sadragyapa. I didn't know anything about the royal palace or Sadragyapa. After greeting him, I took out the Tao energy and took out the square sky fan. I wanted to take action first. When the wild grass appeared, the black-robed Azanaladi's expression turned solemn. He immediately took out a strange golden doll the size of a palm from his loose black robe and casually threw it on the ground. At first, I didn't know what it was. However, when the gold-plated baby landed on the ground, a dark shadow of a child appeared in front of him. He jumped and walked toward me. When I saw the child, I was startled. It wasn't because of the thick energy around the ghost child. It was because I could feel Tong Tong's aura on the ghost child. Could it be that this ghost child was also a ghost infant? I didn't have time to think. I asked Tong Tong, "What's going on?" Tong Tong was paying attention to the situation in the arena. This ghost child isn't a natural ghost child. He's different from her. I calmed down a little. The situation wasn't clear yet, so I didn't hurry to call Tong Tong. I controlled the wild grass shadow to bind the ghost child. As my cultivation level had improved and stabilized, the wild grass phantom, the square sky fan, had turned into a large rattan that was more than 10 feet long. When it waved, it looked like a bunch of whip shadows with a terrifying aura directly attacking the ghost child. It seemed that the ghost child was no match for the wild grass shadows at all. However, when the wild grass shadows approached him, the ghost child just grasped them in his hand casually. Then, he threw them aside and continued to move forward while bouncing. I was shocked again. The ghost child, who was at the Ghost King realm, was stopped for a while by the wild grass shadow. However, the ghost child couldn't resist it at all. At this moment, Azanality spoke in broken Chinese again. "Your magic tool isn't a match for my Come and Thong. We both raise Come and Thongs. If I'm not wrong, your Come and Thong is also at the 3-spirit realm. How about we use our Come and Thongs to fight?" Come and Thong? 3-spirit realm? I was a little confused. I knew about Come and Thongs. They were something similar to ghosts in Nanyang witchcraft. The ghost child in front of me should be one of them. However, he said that I also raise Come and Thongs. What's going on? After thinking for a while, I understood that he had mistaken Tong Tong for a Come and Thong. Although Tong Tong said that she was different from the ghost child, there must be something similar between them. I hesitated for a while, but didn't let Tong Tong come out. This man had observed Tong Tong for several days. He was confident that he could defeat Tong Tong. That was why he had said it so casually. Tong Tong wasn't in her best condition yet. It was hard to say if she could defeat the Come and Thong. To ensure our victory today, I had to exhaust the Come and Thong's power. After making up my mind, I didn't answer him. Instead, I used the Golden Light spell. It turned into a golden halo that shielded me and the ghost child. Then, I used the Pure Yang spell to draw out the Pure Yang Karma Fire to attack the Come and Thong. This was the strongest spell I had against ghosts and spirits. It had worked wonders against the people from the Ghost Nurturing Sect and the Tame Headmaster. Strangely, when the Pure Yang Karma Fire floated in front of Come and Thong, the Come and Thong didn't move. He gently blew at the Pure Yang Karma Fire, making the flame flicker and almost extinguish. I was shocked. The Pure Yang Karma Fire could restrain ghosts. Even the ghosts in the Ghost King realm could only use their energy to slowly wear down the Pure Yang power in the flame. They didn't dare to face it head-on. However, the Come and Thong had such power with just a casual blow. It was unbelievable. Before I could react, Come and Thong actually extended his hands and held the Pure Yang Hellfire in his hands. A black aura rose from his hands and enveloped the flame. Not long after, the Pure Yang Hellfire was completely extinguished. After doing all that, Come and Thong skipped towards me again. He only stopped in front of the halo formed by the Golden Light incantation. He extended his hand and stuffed it into the golden halo. It seemed the Golden Light spell couldn't stop him for long. Now I finally understood why I felt that the Come and Thong was similar to Tong Tong. Although the ghost child was also a soul, he had 3 souls just like Tong Tong. That was why he wasn't afraid of the pure Yang energy. It seemed that I couldn't treat him as an otherworldly item. Using these 2 divine spells alone wouldn't work. After thinking for a while, I took out the Yin and Yang Yama brush that Jean Cameron had lent me. After receiving the Tao energy, the Yin and Yang energy formed a giant yin-yang fish that spiraled toward the ghost child. Seeing the yin-yang fish, the Come and Thong stopped and stood still. He let the yin-yang fish approach him. Then, he suddenly opened his mouth and revealed his sharp teeth. Then, he bit the yin-yang fish. At first, The Kumanthong looked like a child and looked cute. However, when he opened his mouth, his ferocious appearance made people shiver. When he bit down, a part of the yin-yang fish pattern disappeared. However, the Kumanthong didn't have it easy either. He let out a shrill scream. The yin and yang energy flowed in the yin-yang fish. When the Kumanthong bit down, he was attacked by the yin and yang energy. Of course, he felt pain. However, to my surprise, the pain stimulated his ferocity. Not only did he not stop, but he also bit more resolutely. After a few bites, almost half of the yin-yang fish pattern had been bitten off. It looked broken. I smiled wryly. In the end, I was only in the acupuncture realm. I wasn't the Kumanthong's match. I had given up on fighting the Kumanthong alone and was ready to summon Tong Tong. However, before I did, I had to make one last effort to consume as much energy as possible. So I used the Tao energy again and formed a new yin-yang fish. To increase its power, I also used the dark green energy to strengthen the yin-yang fish. Then, I spiraled toward the Kumanthong. When the new yin-yang fish reached the Kumanthong had bitten off the previous one. Its mouth didn't stop and immediately bit at the second yin-yang fish. I thought that the yin-yang fish would only be able to consume it for a moment, but I didn't expect the Kumanthong to suddenly freeze after biting it. A large amount of black liquid flowed out of its mouth, and its entire body trembled. A few seconds later, the Kumanthong prostrated on the ground. It didn't dare move the yin-yang fish that was approaching it. Before I could react, the black-clothed Azanalati, who had been standing calmly at the side, had a drastic change in expression. He quickly walked to where the yin-yang fish was. After looking at it for a while, he also put his palms together and knelt on the ground, muttering something. This sudden turn of events caused everyone in the arena to look at each other in dismay. After a few minutes, the black-clothed Azan finally carefully stood up from the ground. After taking another glance at the yin-yang fish, he suddenly said, "My lord has the power of 9 spirits. Aladi is not your match. I admit defeat for this match." Chapter 211. After Aladi walked down, the people from the Nanyang Taoist faction surrounded him. Their expressions were angry as they loudly said something. I didn't need to listen to know that they were condemning Aladi for giving up on the competition. It was a pity that Aladi didn't pay attention to these people. Instead, he had a strange smile on his face as he stood there. His eyes were still looking at me, giving me goosebumps. At that moment, President Su, Chen Shuha, and the others walked over with surprised expressions and announced the result of the exchange. Afterwards, Chen Shuha walked over and said to the leader of the Nanyang Taoist faction, Lin Zhong, "Now that the competition has ended, according to the previous bet, your ghost-raising sect's Liang Kaishou matter will no longer be pursued. Also, I have a small gift for you." After saying that, he took out a book titled Introduction to Metaphysics and handed it over to Lin Zhong. Previously, when this exchange was decided, the people from a Nanyang Taoist faction had added a condition. They said that if they won, they would give us their Taoist books. Now that we were the ones who won, Chen Shuha had already prepared this kind of common printed material to mock them. Lin Zhong naturally understood Chen Shuha's intentions. After remaining silent for a while with a dark expression, he turned around and left with his group. After they left, the people from the Guangdong branch could no longer suppress the excitement in their hearts and cheered. Zhang Canwen and a few other youngsters rushed over and surrounded me, loudly congratulating me. President Su, Chen Shuha, and the other older people also stood to the side and smiled at me. After Zhang Canwen and the others calmed down, Chen Shuha walked in front of me and said emotionally, "When you obtained the title of Young Phoenix, I only thought that you were a talented youngster. But now, it seems that you are worthy of the title of Young Phoenix. With your pressure points, you were able to defeat the 4 great glorious knowledge experts of the Nanyang Taoist faction. This kind of glory is enough for you to be called a number 1 of the younger generation in the metaphysics world. In the future, it wouldn't be impossible to remove the words younger generation from the world." I could understand his agitation, but this evaluation was a bit too high. There were many crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the world of metaphysics, especially those hidden families and sections. I knew of the geniuses of the corpse sect, the Han family, and the Zhang family. There were many that I didn't know of. I really didn't dare to be called number one. I smirked, but didn't reply. Chen Shuha didn't say much. He just invited President Su and the others to his celebratory party. We should get drunk. I thought he would ask us to come too, but he said we young people would not be happy in the company of old men, so he left us to celebrate on our own. Then, he pulled President Su and the others and left. Zhang Kanwen and Zhang Wenfei, the two brothers, dragged me to a nearby restaurant and celebrated. I returned to the hotel in a drunken state after midnight. I fell asleep on my bed and didn't wake up until the sun was high up in the sky. After waking up, I circulated my Dao Qi, and the alcohol was gone. However, I wasn't in a hurry to get up. Instead, I lay there lazily and thought about the black-clothed Azan. From how the Kumanthong had bitten off the first yin-yang fish, I could see that they weren't afraid of the yin-yang fish. Moreover, the second yin-yang fish had an extra dark green energy compared to the first one. It was obvious that the black-clothed Azan had knelt down and admitted defeat because of the dark green energy. I vaguely remembered that he had said something about the power of the 9 spirits. Did the black-clothed Azan know what the dark green energy was? According to my previous speculation, the dark green energy was the residual power of the Dao Qi, but I wasn't sure. Moreover, since the black-clothed Azan knew this power, had he come into contact with it? I suddenly thought of a possibility. The dark green energy came from the Tai Sui. Had the black-clothed Azan come into contact with another Tai Sui? During the trip to the corpse sect, I had a vague feeling that the Tai Sui was the corpse of the Star of Time, and there were only 4 stars of time. If the giant corpse of the corpse sect was really the Tai Sui, then I had already seen 2 Tai Sui, and there were still 2 I hadn't seen yet. If I could find a 3rd Tai Sui through the black-clothed Azan, it would be the best. I couldn't cultivate the dark green energy, so I could only absorb it from the black bead. Most of the black bead's energy was used to isolate the aura of the true dragon vein. I wouldn't be able to come into contact with the giant corpse of the corpse sect in a short time. If I could find a 3rd Tai Sui, maybe I could get another black bead that I could absorb. The people from the Nanyang Dao wouldn't leave so soon. I thought about it and immediately called Wang Yongjun. I wanted him to help me find out where the people from the Nanyang Dao were staying. However, the call didn't go through. I guess that Wang Yongjun was busy. I thought for a while then, called Dai Nanzhou. He was Wang Yongjun's assistant, so I could ask him to take care of this matter. It turned out that Dai Nanzhou was very efficient. In the afternoon, he called me back. Not only did he tell me the hotel where the people from the Nanyang Dao were staying, but he also told me something else. He told me that when he went to the Four Seasons Hotel to check the room number of the Nanyang Dao people, he met Su Ziyu. When I heard the name, I didn't remember. After a few seconds, I remembered what had happened that year. Su Ziyu, how are you doing now? Dai Nanzhou hesitated for a while then, said, Su Ziyu doesn't seem to be doing well. When I met him today, he looked very strange. His face seemed to have a dark aura. Moreover, when I met him, I saw him enter the room of the black-clothed Azan of the Nanyang Dao group. I was surprised. How did Su Ziyu get involved with the people from the Nanyang Dao group? In recent years, I've heard news about Su Ziyu on and off. She's now a very famous female celebrity. In the entertainment circle, there are often rumors of people going to Southeast Asia to visit various eminent monks. Could it be that Su Ziyu is in the same situation? It was understandable, but Dai Nanzhou said that Su Ziyu's face seemed to have a layer of dark energy. This was even stranger. I had seen Su Ziyu's glabella on the TV, but I couldn't see it clearly through the TV screen, so I didn't pay much attention to it. However, Dai Nanzhou was just an ordinary person. If he could see something strange on Su Ziyu's face, things wouldn't be that simple. While I was pondering, Dai Nanzhou hurriedly asked, No matter what, we're old classmates. Do you want to check on her? After hesitating for a while, I nodded and agreed. Su Ziyu seemed to have some connection with the black-clothed Azan, and I also needed to contact him. It wouldn't be a bad idea to check on Su Ziyu first. After I agreed, Dainanzhou immediately told me Su Ziyu's address. I couldn't help but laugh. This fellow was really warm-hearted. He had already prepared everything. Su Ziyu was a celebrity, after all, and ordinary people couldn't meet her. However, Dainanzhou had used Wang Yongjun's connections to contact the CEO of an entertainment company in Hong Kong. He then arranged for someone to take us to the hotel where Su Ziyu was staying. The moment I saw Su Ziyu, I furrowed my brows. Dainanzhou wasn't wrong. Su Ziyu had encountered a big problem. Her glabella was dark, and anyone with a bit of knowledge about geomancy could see that she didn't have long to live. I used my Tao energy to check on her soul. Then, I found out that her fate wasn't in danger, but that her 3 souls were unstable. The dark glabella was a sign that her life soul was unstable. If I wasn't wrong, Su Ziyu only had half a month left to live. Moreover, her 3 souls were unstable, which caused her to be sick and her memory to deteriorate. She seemed to be in a trance. Logically speaking, her body should be very haggard, but the strange thing was that when I looked at her, I felt an indescribable attraction. I looked at her for a long time, but I didn't understand what was going on. But soon, I found a small gilded doll on her body, which reminded me of the Common Thong of Azan. Was it possible that Su Ziyu's situation was because she had been supporting the Common Thong? At this time, Su Ziyu's expression also changed. It was obvious that she recognized me and Dainanzhou. But strangely, Su Ziyu pretended not to know us. With a cold face, she asked the assistant next to her to chase us out. Dainanzhou scolded Su Ziyu with a gloomy face. I had a strange feeling in my heart. Su Ziyu knew who I was, and logically speaking, she should be asking me for help. Why did she pretend not to know me and chase me out? Before I could figure out, a figure suddenly walked in front of Dainanzhou and me. He said to me, with a strange tone and a faint smile, "Little brother Zhou Yi, do you still remember me?" I looked up and saw a white-haired old man wearing sunglasses. His body was emitting Tao energy, and he seemed to be in the early stage of the acupoint sealing realm. I frowned, but before I could say anything, the old man took off his sunglasses and said with a smile, "You should recognize me now, right?" He was right. The moment he took off his sunglasses, I recognized him. This person was Professor Deng Ming, who had killed a child in Su Ziyu's stomach. After so many years, this evil person from back then had actually appeared in front of me again. Before I could say anything, Deng Ming put his sunglasses back on and looked at me emotionally. "Back then, I thought that you were quite talented, but I didn't expect that after so many years, you still don't have much Tao energy. What a pity." Hearing his words, I felt a little strange. My current realm far surpassed his, and with the dark green energy concealing me, it was normal that he couldn't see through my cultivation. But I didn't expect him to think that my cultivation was too low. Chapter 212. Listening to Professor Deng's words and looking at his face as if he was in control of my life and death, I found it funny. At the same time, I couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Professor Deng had taught me the correct understanding of Qi and brought me to the Earth Master Realm. From then until now, it had only been 3 or 4 years. Previously, I had been amazed by Yi Pianpian's terrifying progress in 3 years. Now that I look back at myself, I realize that I wasn't worse than Yi Pianpian. No wonder Professor Deng thought that I was still in the dragon-seeking realm. Before I could speak, Dainanzhou spoke first. He pretended to point at Professor Deng and said sternly, "Don't mess around. Zhou Yi is now a member of the Shenzhen Metaphysics Association. If anything happens to him, the Shenzhen Metaphysics Association will never let you go." Shenzhen Metaphysics Society? Professor Deng sneered disdainfully. The Metaphysics Society is a dirty place. They won't care if you live or die. Hearing his familiar tone, I remembered that Professor Deng had also held a position in the Metaphysics Society. Moreover, he had been the vice president. According to the Metaphysics Society's rules, the vice president was an honorary position, and his power had to be at least in the acupuncture realm. From then until now, Professor Deng's power hadn't increased at all. In the metaphysics world, increasing one's power was the most important thing to everyone. Professor Deng had refined a ghost and harmed people. His goal was obviously to increase his power. It was a ridiculous result. I interrupted Professor Deng. I can hand over the ghost child, but we can't do it in public. Let's find a place first. Deng Meng was surprised by my cooperative attitude. He looked at me hesitantly and pointed at Su Ziyu's room not far from us. He sneered. Let's go there. After listening to him, I sighed. It seemed Professor Deng hadn't been following Su Ziyu in the dark all these years. He had been following her openly. It wasn't hard to imagine what kind of life Su Ziyu had been living with such an old man. I nodded and called Dainan Zhou. Then, we returned to Su Ziyu's room with Professor Deng. Seeing us return with Professor Deng, Su Ziyu's face turned gloomy. He sighed and sat down dejectedly. Professor Deng waved his hand and asked Su Ziyu's assistant to leave. He closed the door and urged me again. I smiled at him and let Tong Tong come out from the J bracelet. As soon as the pupil appeared, Professor Deng's eyes suddenly widened. He stared at the pupil with burning eyes, and his face was full of fascination. After a long while, he muttered to himself, "It really is a heavenly fetus. It really is a heavenly fetus. It has grown so big in just a few years." As he spoke, Professor Deng reached out to grab Tong Tong, but when his hand stretched out halfway, he suddenly froze there. He suddenly cried out involuntarily, "No, why is this in chi? Why is it so thick?" Then, he abruptly retracted his outstretched hand. He looked at Tong Tong and asked me, "This heavenly embryo, what realm is it now?" My Tao energy was covered by the dark green energy, so Professor Deng couldn't sense it. However, Tong Tong was different. Even if she didn't release the thick yin chi, it was enough to frighten people. As Professor Deng had reached the acupoint ceiling realm, of course he could sense it. I smiled at him and said calmly, "A few days ago, she broke through to the Ghost King realm. I guess she's at the glorious knowledge realm among geomancy masters." "Ghost King," Professor Deng exclaimed. He couldn't help but take half a step back. His face was frightened and envious. He looked at Tong Tong and then at me. After a long time, he finally spoke again. This time, his voice wasn't as calm as before. He sounded a little guilty. "In just a few years, she has grown from a little soul to the Ghost King realm. Even if she's just a heavenly fetus, her innate talent is really amazing. It's a waste for her to stay with you. Give her to me." I take back what I said. "As long as you give her to me, I can let you go." I pulled a chair from the side and sat down. I looked at Professor Deng with interest. "She has the Ghost King cultivation base, and she listens to me. I don't understand why you dare to threaten me under such circumstances." Professor Deng looked at Tong Tong. Then, he turned to me and said coldly, "Ghosts and humans are different. Even if she has the Ghost King realm, so what? She doesn't know any spells or soul tools. How much of her power can she use? You want to rely on this ghost, but you've made a mistake. Kid, you could try." What he said wasn't wrong. The Ghost King realm was just a realm. It meant that Tong Tong's yin energy had reached this realm. However, yin energy alone wasn't enough. It was like a person who had Tao energy but didn't know any spells. He couldn't use his power at all. The Jing Gui that Tong Tong and I had fought together was the same. Although he was at the Ghost King realm, he didn't know any spells. In the end, Tong Tong and I had worked together to defeat him. Tong Tong was different. She had been cultivating the divine techniques from the Death Scripture. With her heavenly yin energy, not only could she use her power, but she could also use her power beyond her normal level. I grinned. I didn't want to argue with Deng Mundo anymore, so I directly said, "Professor Deng, you used to refine small ghosts. Do you really think that a seeking Dragon Realm cultivator can control a ghost with the power of a Ghost King?" Deng Meng frowned, and his voice became hoarse. What do you mean?" I smiled and activated the dark green power. I didn't hide my Tao energy anymore. Ordinary people couldn't sense Tao energy, so Dainan Zhou and Su Ziyu didn't move. However, Deng Meng's eyes opened wide. His body seemed to be shivering as he shouted, "Impossible! How could it be?" I stood up from the chair and my smile turned cold. I said softly, I believe that after that incident, Professor Ding hasn't been in the Metaphysics Society anymore, right? If you're still in the Metaphysics Society, you should have heard of the name of the Young Phoenix. Young Phoenix. Ding Ming naturally understood what that term meant. His face turned pale, and his body shivered even more violently. As I walked forward, I continued to smile coldly. Professor Ding, I reckon that you don't pay much attention to the news. These few days, the Guangdong Metaphysics Society had a friendly competition with the Nanyang Taoists. The Nanyang Taoists were all at the glory of consciousness realm. I'm untalented, but I defeated 4 of them in a row. Deng Ming's face turned the color of a pig's liver, and he sat on the ground. At that moment, I walked in front of him and looked at him coldly. I bent down and said, Professor Deng, although you aren't in the Metaphysics Society and don't pay attention to the news, you should have heard of the saying, those who do evil will bring about their own destruction. From Professor Jiao's child to Su Ziyu and the child in her womb, you've done so many evil deeds. I wonder how much regret you have today. Professor Deng's pale face regained some color at this moment. He gritted his teeth, and his eyes instantly turned scarlet. He struggled to sit up straight and said in a hoarse voice, the metaphysics world has always been a place where the strong prey on the weak. I'm just unlucky this time to have met a genius like you. If it were someone else, I would have successfully obtained this heavenly fetus so long ago, and my strength would not have been reduced to this level. Those who do evil will bring about their own destruction. What is righteousness and what is unrighteousness? I shook my head. What is righteousness? What is unrighteousness? When you were refining little ghosts, you went to the graveyard, the mortuary, and even dug up graves to look for corpses. But you killed people and refined their souls. That is unrighteousness. When you asked me for the spirit, you directly controlled me and took it by force. You even killed me and took it away. That is unrighteousness. But you set up a trap and killed Su Ziyu's child. That is unrighteousness. After doing such a heartless thing, as long as you have the slightest bit of remorse, you could go into hiding or forget about this matter and continue on with your life. However, you've been by Su Ziyu's side for so many years, and you've caused her to become like this. This is unrighteousness. As the saying goes, those who do evil are unrighteous. Let me ask you again, do you have any regrets? Deng Meng's eyes were still red as he sneered. I only know the law of the jungle. If I had any regrets, would you have let me go today? I don't have any regrets. I stooped down and stared into his crimson eyes. I smiled, but it was an extremely cold smile. I squeezed the words out between my teeth. Chapter 2:13. After dealing with Deng Meng, I asked Dainanzhou to call Wang Yongjun. Since Wang Yongjun was able to build up such a large family fortune in Shenzhen, he was naturally well connected with both the legal and the underworld. After finding out what had happened, he quickly sent a few unfamiliar faces to help clean up the scene and leave with Deng Meng's body. Of course, before Deng Meng's body was taken away, I had taken everything from him. I checked Deng Meng's belongings and found that most of them were ghost host vessels. After checking, I found that those ghosts had ordinary power. They were useless to me. Thus, I released the imprisoned ghosts and chanted an incantation to release them from their suffering. Although I had released them, most of them had followed Deng Meng and done many evil things. They were entangled with karma. It was easy to go to the afterlife, but it was hard to reincarnate. After dealing with Deng Meng's case, I called Su Ziyu and asked her about her life these years. Su Ziyu didn't talk much. She seemed to be a little reluctant to talk to me. She sat there and lit a cigarette. Professor Deng came to her 2 years ago. Since then, except for one visit to my school, where he couldn't find me, he had been staying by her side, waiting for me to show up. 2 years ago was around 1.5 years after Deng Meng disappeared. During that time, he must have recovered from his wounds and found a way to deal with the white-clothed ghost in the jade bracelet. That was why he went to find me. If he had found me at that time, I wouldn't have been his opponent. Luckily, I wasn't in the school at that time, so he didn't have the chance to find me. Now that he has finally found me, my strength is already beyond his imagination. However, I still found it strange. If Deng Meng wanted to find me, he could have found many ways. Staying by Suzy Yu's side wasn't a good idea. I turned to look at the gold-plated baby next to Suzy Yu and vaguely got the answer. Suzy Yu's baby had died as soon as it was born. Since it had an innate Yin body, its soul also carried Yin energy. If it was refined into a ghost, it would be extraordinary. Considering Deng Meng's cultivation methods, it was possible that he had gone to find Suzy Yu because of this baby. However, I didn't know why this baby was made into a common thong. After a moment of hesitation, I also lit a cigarette and voiced out my doubts. Suzy Yu's calm face finally changed. She didn't bring the cigarette to her lips for a long time before she finally spoke. Back then, after I passed away, she couldn't let go of the knot in her heart. She didn't want to bury her child. Later on, she read about the common thong in Thailand on the internet. She was so happy that she brought the remains of her child to Thailand. She found an asin in a famous temple and made the child into a common thong. Since then, she has been taking care of the child. Common thong's dharmic powers were extremely powerful, especially for common thong like Suzy Yu, who was refined from his own flesh and blood. His dharmic powers were far stronger than ordinary common thongs. However, Suzy Yu wasn't someone from the metaphysics world. Common thong's dharma powers weren't displayed in battle, but in bringing her fortune and luck. After returning from Thailand, Suzy Yu calmed herself down and returned to society. Her luck suddenly improved, and she accidentally participated in a talent show. She immediately became famous and entered the entertainment circle. In the entertainment industry, it was very difficult for a newcomer to produce any works or become popular if there was no one to support them. However, Suzy Yu was different. She became popular when she participated in a talent show, and after signing a contract with a small entertainment company, she quickly got a job opportunity and settled down. Her talent and hard work were part of it, but most of it was because of the common thong. There had always been a saying that the fortune brat was a good omen, so it wasn't strange that the common thong had such an effect. However, in essence, the common thong's effect wasn't to bring Suzy Yu good luck. It was to change her aura and make people who saw her be attracted to her. Just like when I saw Suzy Yu today, I clearly sensed that there was something wrong with her body. There was dancing energy around her, but I still felt that she was very attractive. Over the years, Suzy Yu had relied on the changes brought about by the common thong to gain some fame in the entertainment circle. From the looks of it, the common thong really seemed to be something amazing. Unfortunately, there weren't so many things in the world that came without sewing. What the common thong brought to Suzy Yu wasn't just the rise of her career, but also the collapse of her body. When she joined the talent show, I sensed the Yin energy in her body through the television screen. After so many years of providing for the common thong, her bodily functions had regressed. Her skin was loose, and she was dispirited. Even her lifespan had been greatly reduced. If it weren't for the common thong's support, Suzy Yu's current appearance would be unsightly. But even so, Suzy Yu wouldn't have fallen to this state. Her soul had been corroded by the Yin energy, and her three souls were all unstable. She only had less than half a month left to live. There had to be something else going on. After asking for more information, Suzy Yu told me that Deng Meng had found her and found that the fetus had been made into a common thong. He was enraged. For the past 2 years, he had been torturing Suzy Yu crazily and used her body to nurture the souls of those little ghosts. Suzy Yu's voice was calm, as if she was talking about something normal. However, I knew what kind of person Deng Meng was. It was hard to imagine what kind of torture Suzy Yu had gone through behind his seemingly calm words. After finding the reason, I didn't ask more and turned to find a way to solve the problem in Suzy Yu's body. The problem with her soul was really tricky. Even I didn't have a way to cure it completely. After thinking for a while, I asked Tong Tong to take out most of the Yin energy in Suzy Yu's soul. Then, I used several talismans to temporarily stabilize her soul. This method didn't solve the root of the problem, but it could help her prolong her lifespan to around half a year. However, there was a way to cure the root of the problem. Suzy Yu had to practice Taoist techniques herself. When Yin energy entered the soul, there were only 2 ways to get rid of it. First, she could control the Yin energy in the soul and use it for her own use. Second, she could use her own Taoist energy to nurture it and gradually wear it down. After thinking for a while, I told Su Ziyu about the situation and told her that she had to quit the entertainment circle. She had to give up her career and cultivate. Moreover, there were two places she could choose to cultivate. The first was the ghost-raising sect of the Hong Kong Taoist school. Recently, I hadn't gotten along with the ghost-raising sect. That was why I knew the cultivation method of the ghost-raising sect. The ghost-raising sect raised Yin souls, and their souls had to be strong enough to control them. Moreover, the cultivation method of the ghost-raising sect leaned toward the evil side, which was suitable for Su Ziyu's current condition. The second was the Orthodox Taoist school, which was the most neutral and peaceful Taoist school in the world. After practicing it, it was very easy to wear down the Yin energy in the soul. The only drawback was that the Orthodox Taoist school's cultivation method was very difficult. It was hard to say if she could make any progress in half a year. As for the Taoist school, it wasn't that I didn't consider it, but it was too difficult to get started in Taoist studies. It took me several years to get started in Taoist studies, and Su Ziyu obviously didn't have that much time. Of course, it wasn't that it was easy to get into either the ghost-raising sect or the Orthodox school. However, Su Ziyu was a famous celebrity, so it was much easier for her to convert to the Taoist school than ordinary people. It shouldn't be a problem. After listening to my story, Su Ziyu was stunned for a while. Then, she suddenly asked, "The sect you practice should be in the mainland, right?" I was surprised, but I nodded. "I guess it's in the mainland, but after converting, I've been living a peaceful life. Whether it's the mainland or Hong Kong, there's no difference. In fact, the Orthodox school was very different from the evil Taoist school like the ghost-raising sect. However, I didn't think it was a serious matter, so I didn't mention it." Chapter 2:14. After making a choice, it meant that the matter was settled. Su Ziyu stubbed out the cigarette, but in her hand, and sat up. "Next, I need to deal with my own affairs and contact my family. It will take about half a month. By then, the result of contacting the Zhengyi school should be out." I nodded and gave her 2 mind-calming and soul-calming talismans. Then, I stood up to bid farewell. However, before I left, I suddenly remembered about Azan. I stopped and asked her, "Why do you have a relationship with him?" Su Ziyu said, "Azan was the one who made her come in thong back then. She heard from other believers that Azan had come to Shenzhen, so she came to visit him." After saying that, she kept silent for a while. I wanted to ask Master Azan to kill Deng Meng, but I don't think there's a need for that now. Her voice was as calm as before, but the calmer she was, the more she couldn't hide her deep-rooted hatred for Deng Meng. I sighed and didn't say anything else. I left with Dainanzhou. After saying goodbye to Su Ziyu, I asked Dainanzhou to go back alone while I went to Azan's room. The people of the Nanyang Taoist sect must hate me to the bone. But with their strength, even if they had evil intentions, it was impossible for them to make me stay. So, I didn't think too much about it and went to Azan's room. Today, I came with a friendly attitude. According to the rules of the metaphysics world, I purposely dispersed the dark green energy and released my cultivation base. After standing at the door for a few seconds, I reached out and knocked on the door. Soon, the door opened. Azan was standing at the door. He seemed to know that I was coming. He didn't look surprised at all. Instead, he asked in broken Chinese with a respectful smile, "You're here?" Looking at the black robe tie with tattoos all over his body, I had a strange feeling. It was as if he could see through everything about me. After a moment of absent-mindedness, I cupped my hands at him. I didn't say anything and walked in. Azan invited me to sit in the tea room outside the suite. After serving me tea, he took a sip and sighed. China's tea ceremony is very good. When I was in Thailand, my master brewed tea for me every day. He didn't let me drink iced tea, only hot tea. He told me stories about China's tea ceremony. I've admired China since I was young. I imitated him and picked up a teacup that was as thin as a cicada's wing. After drinking a cup, I wanted to respond to him. However, I didn't understand much about the tea ceremony. I could only smile wryly and say, "In Chinese people's minds, everything has a Tao. Our cultivation is to seek the Tao, and tasting tea is also to seek the Tao. Through analogy, it might be beneficial for our cultivation. Aizen seemed like I had met a close friend. His words, and his eyes glowed, and hurriedly he nodded. Tao with that. Looking at his expression, I felt even weirder. In the previous exchange competition, no matter if it was the Hong Kong ghost-nurturing sect or the tame headmaster, they all practiced Taoist techniques from the Central Plains. They were also overseas Chinese, but all of them were hostile to the mainland's Taoist sections. On the contrary, this time man, Aizen, seemed to admire the Central Plains culture. After sipping a few more cups of tea, Aizen took the initiative to mention the dark green power. Lord, since you came to visit today, you must have come for the power of the 9 spirits, right? I nodded. Although the way he addressed it was different, according to the situation that day, the power of the 9 spirits that he mentioned was the dark green power. Lord, you are the Holy Sun and have already obtained the recognition of the power of the 9 spirits. Aizen is slow-witted and has yet to obtain the recognition of the power of the 9 spirits. If Lord has any questions, I'm afraid that I won't be able to answer, Aizen said respectfully. Hearing him address me as Lord, I felt awkward. I couldn't help but ask, why do you call me Lord? What does Holy Sun mean? Aizen smiled. In our Grand King's palace, if you can obtain the recognition of the power of the 9 spirits, you are the Holy Sun. The Holy Sun status is very high, so we naturally have to address you as Lord. After hearing his words, I was even more certain that the Grand King's palace was related to the Tai Sui. After pondering for a while, I asked, how many Holy Suns do you have now? Aizen shook his head. My teacher used to be the Holy Sun. Ever since he became Shiragami, the Grand King's palace didn't have another Holy Sun. If Lord comes to our Grand King's palace to observe the power of the 9 spirits, we will definitely welcome you as a Holy Sun. His words confused me. I couldn't help but ask, I'm not a member of the Grand King's palace. How can I observe the power of the 9 spirits? Aizen continued to nod. It doesn't matter if you're a member of the Grand King's palace or not. What's important is the recognition of the power of the 9 spirits. No matter who Lord is, you will always be respected by the Grand King's palace. Observing the power of the 9 spirits is your right. Waves surged in my heart. Before coming here, I had been thinking of ways to find the Tai Sui. I had never expected Aizen to say that. If his words represented the attitude of the Grand King's palace, I would have to find some time to go to Thailand to find the Tai Sui. Moreover, according to what he said, the Holy Sun was someone who had the power of the 9 spirits. In that case, the people of the Grand King's palace had a tradition of obtaining the power of the Tai Sui. This would definitely help me increase my dark green power. After making up my mind, I asked for the detailed address of the Grand King's palace, as well as how to contact him when I got there. Aizen looked delighted and didn't seem to be faking it. Not only did he answer all my questions, but he also told me to go as soon as possible. His teacher would be very happy to see me. It was obvious that I couldn't go as soon as possible. Although Aizen's enthusiasm didn't seem fake, it was a foreign country after all. It was hard to say what I would encounter. Moreover, I had already reached the 9 apertures acupuncture realm. I would have to wait until I reached the glory of consciousness realm at the earliest. At that time, I would be able to escape even if I were to face the Celestial Master. From Aizen's cultivation base, the teacher he had mentioned, Shirapana, was at the Celestial Master realm. After pondering for a while, I told him a general date. Next year. After making an appointment, I asked him about the 3 spirits realm he had mentioned the other day. I also asked him about the relationship between the 3 spirits and the power of the 9 spirits. Aizen told me, 1 spirit to 9 spirits is the division of Kumen Thong and Aizen's cultivation base. However, the 9 spirits is a cultivation base that only gods can have. Ordinary people can't reach it. That's why the power of the 9 spirits is also the power of gods. I was startled. His Kumen Thong and Pupilu had the power of the Ghost King, which was equivalent to the glory of consciousness in metaphysics. This was only the 3 spirits realm? Then, The four spirits was the celestial master's cultivation base. But what were the realms of the five spirits and the six spirits? Moreover, he had said that the nine spirits were gods. So, Tai Sui's power was much higher than the celestial master's. Although the death scripture recorded a lot of things, and could even be called an encyclopedia, it only recorded the basic content. When it came to cultivation, the higher the realm, the fewer things were recorded. When it came to the celestial master realm, there were only a few sentences. As for the higher realms, there was no mention of them. I seized the chance to ask Aizen about the cultivation base of the five spirits and six spirits realms. However, Aizen waved his hand and said with a matter-of-fact face, "I can't talk about it if my realm isn't high enough." I felt discouraged. After drinking afternoon tea and asking questions, I got up and left around dusk. Before I left, Aizen gave me a bronze three-faced Buddha statue the size of a finger. He told me that it was a keepsake from the royal palace and that he wanted to give it to me as a souvenir. On the way back to my hotel, I received a call from Zhang Wenfei. He told me that he and his senior brother, Zhang Canwen, were going back to Meizhou in advance tonight. After the exchange competition, the members of the Guangdong branch had agreed to return to their hometown tomorrow after the meeting. Why did Zhang Wenfei and the rest want to return early? Just as I was about to ask, Zhang Wenfei seemed to be in a hurry and hung up the phone. I reckoned that he had encountered something urgent. I wanted to call back and ask, but after thinking about it, I put down the phone. With my relationship with Zhang Wenfei, if he really encountered something difficult, he would definitely look for me for help. I reckoned that it was just a matter of urgency. I might as well not waste his time and call him again tomorrow or the day after. After Zhang Wenfei and his senior brother left, there weren't many people in the Guangdong branch that were close to me. To avoid trouble, I didn't attend the farewell party on the second day. Instead, I stayed in the hotel to cultivate in peace. I had just stabilized my pressure point 9 aperture's realm, so it would be difficult for me to increase it in a short period of time. However, the completion of the 10 aperture's realm would arrive soon. Right now, I needed to start making preparations to raise my glory of knowledge realm. According to the metaphysics world, the glory of knowledge realm was to pluck the power of the stars in the sky and absorb it into one's body to reach this realm. It was rumored that in ancient times, when almighty people reached this realm, they would reach out and pluck the stars out of thin air to obtain the power of the stars in the sky. Of course, this was just a saying. It sounded incredible, but in reality, there were almost no rumors of plucking stars. In reality, almost all feng shui masters wanted to advance to the glory of knowledge realm, and the only way was to obtain obsidian. There were a total of 7 stars in the sky. The sun and the moon were the rulers, so there was no news of obsidian descending. Therefore, only the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were left for feng shui masters to use. It was rumored that obsidian was obtained from meteorites. Of course, not all meteorites were obsidian. Only an extremely small portion of meteorites might contain a small piece of obsidian. This was also the reason why Taoists, monks, and feng shui masters loved to study meteorites since ancient times. In modern times, especially after the establishment of the Metaphysics Society, meteorites were mostly discovered and collected by the country at the first instance. Then, they were handed over to the Metaphysics Society for use. Therefore, after reaching the peak of pressure point perfection, some feng shui masters who contributed or had talent would receive obsidian from the Metaphysics Society. However, there were 2 problems in the middle. First, obsidian was divided into 5 elements. Feng shui masters also had 5 elements. They had to find the most suitable obsidian for themselves in order to increase their strength as much as possible. Because obsidian was too rare, it was difficult for the Metaphysics Society to fulfill this condition. The second problem was more important. The advancement of a feng shui master to the glory of knowledge realm wasn't constant. In simple terms, a small piece of obsidian or a large piece of obsidian could allow a feng shui master to advance. Let's not talk about success or failure for now. After a successful advancement, The amount of obsidian used would have a huge impact on one's strength. It was impossible for the Metaphysics Society to provide obsidian without limit. In this case, to ensure that one could advance and not be affected after the advancement, one could only think of a way. Of course, I wouldn't put my hopes on the obsidian given by the Metaphysics Society. I was thinking about the inscription I saw in the Fire God Temple. Chapter 2:15. Although I had a goal, there were still many problems. When I first came to Fire God Temple, I couldn't enter the door. And even if I did enter, I didn't know if I could get the fire obsidian or if I could come out alive. It was said that risk and opportunity coexisted, but the risk in Fire God Temple was too great. It was hard to say if it was worth the risk. But then again, I had already told Yi Piampian about Fire God Temple. When I left the capital, the people from the Metaphysics Association had already left for Fire God Temple. With their power, they might be able to solve the secret of Fire God Temple. At that time, with my contribution and Old Man Lee's favor, I might be able to get enough fire obsidian for my use. That was only the first problem. Another problem was that the fire obsidian might not be suitable for me. When a feng shui master reached the complete acupoint sealing realm, the 10 acupoints in the heaven meridian would be full. At that time, through a special detection artifact, the feng shui master's 5 elements would appear. There are 5 stars in the sky and 5 elements in humans. The essence of metaphysics was similar to Confucianism's unity of man and nature, especially in the glory of knowledge realm. When using the light obsidian to obtain star power, one had to use the light obsidian that was compatible with one's 5-star origin. So, even if I got the fire obsidian, I could only use it when my 5-star origin was of the fire attribute. After careful consideration, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Every step in metaphysics was extremely difficult. There was no shortcut. I could only be prepared to accept the difficulties. The only good thing was that there was still some time between the 9 acupoints sealing realm and the 10 acupoints sealing realm. At least, I could relax during this time and not think about glory of knowledge. Everything would have to wait until the 10 acupoints sealing realm was completed. In the next few days, I had some free time. I called Yi Piampian and the Fatty, but I couldn't get through to either of them. Yi Piampian was most likely at Fire God Temple, and she was with the people from the Metaphysics Association. I didn't have anything to worry about. However, things were different with Fatty. I had planned to go to Fatty's sect in Kaifeng to see how things were going when I returned home for the new year. However, the Liu family had come knocking on my door. Too many things had happened, so I had to put the matter aside. Although I didn't look for him, I had a feeling that even if I went, I wouldn't be able to find him. Fatty has my contact information, and when I met Fatty's father, I told him my address in Shenzhen. If the father and son were to successfully leave the Fire God Temple, they would definitely contact me. As I thought about it, I felt a little down. I could only pray for the Fatty in my heart, hoping that he would be blessed. Then, I called Zhang Wenfei. I wanted to ask him why they were in such a hurry to return to their hometown. However, I couldn't get through to him. We hadn't known each other for a long time, but Zhang Wenfei was definitely a friend of mine. He had left in a hurry, and I couldn't get through to him. I couldn't help but feel worried. After hanging up, I suddenly remembered that Zhang Wenfei had told me that his teacher, Zhao Dingwu, had invited me to Meizhou when I had time. He said that he wanted to talk to me about something. It just so happened that I had some free time in the next few days. I would take this chance to go to Meizhou and see Zhang Wenfei's situation. After making up my mind, I contacted Wang Yongjun. I wanted to tell him that I would be away for a few days. However, Wang Yongjun told me that he needed to find a location for a new factory and wanted to trouble me to check on its geomancy. Ever since I had received his salary, I had been in a state of unemployment. It wasn't easy for me to find an opportunity to do something. Of course, I agreed and pushed the matter of going to Meizhou to the back of my mind. In the next 3 days, I followed Wang Yongjun to visit a few locations. After a while, I found 2 places with good geomancy. One was the heavenly sea comes out of the stable. Saturn was like a stable where the horses came out of the flat ground. The heavenly horses would gather in groups, and they wouldn't be taken care of. The stars would gather together, and the owner would be very rich. Moreover, it was a rapid geomancy. The second was the red-crowned crane hanging down pecking. The earth was heavy, but the fire was light. The fire wasn't obvious, so it stopped at being rich. It was a rich and slightly noble geomancy. After thinking for a while, I chose the second red-crowned crane hanging down pecking as the location to build the factory. Although the heavenly sea comes out of the stable was better, Wang Yongjun was a merchant. A rich and noble geomancy wasn't a good thing for him. Moreover, he had a lot of assets, and his business had reached a stable stage. A rapid geomancy wasn't suitable for him. On the contrary, the second red-crowned crane hanging down pecking was stable, and it was the most suitable for him. After confirming, I told him the principles in between. After Wang Yongjun listened to me, he was silent for a while. Then, he sighed and said, "Brother Zhou, although I'm a few years older than you, my state of mind is much worse than yours. To be honest, when I heard about the first rich and noble geomancy, I couldn't help but feel a bit greedy. After you explained the reason, I finally understood. You're right. For me, stability is the most suitable. Thinking about the rich and noble geomancy will only bring trouble to myself. Today, I've learned my lesson. Our factory will be located at the place where the red-crowned crane hanging down pecking." After he finished speaking, I waved my hand and smiled. It wasn't that I was being modest. Anyone who heard about the rich and noble geomancy would feel greedy. Not to mention, Wang Yongjun was still confused by the situation. It was already hard for him to not be affected by greed. If I were to put myself in his shoes, I'm not sure if I could make the same open-minded choice as him. After finishing this, Wang Yongjun gave me a check for 1 million renminbi. He said that it was for your hard work. When I first accepted the job, Wang Yongjun said that the annual salary would be calculated separately. Every time I worked, I would get a bonus. At this time, I didn't refuse and directly accepted it. Then, I asked Wang Yongjun about his recent plans. After learning that there wouldn't be anything else for the time being, I told him about going to Meizhou. Although I was hired by him, Wang Yongjun never asked about my whereabouts. Of course, he wouldn't say anything. Since Meizhou wasn't too far from Shenzhen, he directly asked his driver, Wang Kuan, to take me there. He said that he had a lot of business dealings there. Wang Kuan had also stayed there before, so he was more familiar with the place. It was more convenient to have someone pick me up, so I didn't refuse. With Wang Kuan on my feet, we set off to Meizhou. We set off at noon and arrived at Meizhou City around 5 p.m. We first found a hotel to stay in before driving to Meizhou's metaphysics branch. Before coming here, I had already asked Yang Kai-chin for the specific address of the Meizhou branch. At this time, I didn't need to ask around. I quickly reached the place. Meizhou City was much smaller than Shenzhen, but the Meizhou branch wasn't any worse than the Shenzhen branch. It was also an entire building, but it was different from the modern style of Shenzhen. The Meizhou branch's building had an antique style. Aside from the fact that the building was too tall, the rest of the building was arranged in the style of ancient China. It looked very pleasing to the eye. However, when I stood at the door, I stopped. I didn't directly enter. It wasn't because someone was stopping me. It was because there were several white banners hanging on the main entrance of the Meizhou branch. On the two sides of the door, there were also funeral couplets and wreaths. From the looks of it, it seemed that there was a funeral going on. I had a bad premonition. After entering, I saw a mourning hall in the lobby. In the middle of the mourning hall, there was a huge black and white photo. It was Grandpa Zhao Dingwu's photo. No wonder Zhang Wenfei and his fellow disciple had rushed back. It turned out that Grandpa Zhao had passed away. Although I hadn't had much contact with Grandpa Zhao, whether it was the stories I'd heard about his life or the warning he had given me, it was enough to make me respect him. There were many people in the hall paying their respects to Grandpa Zhao. When I walked to the front of the mourning hall, someone handed me 3 sticks of incense. I took them and lit them. I respectfully bowed to Grandpa Zhao's portrait 3 times. Then, I grabbed some paper money from the short table and burned them. After that, I stood up and left the mourning hall. Although I was also grieving, funerals and condolences had proper etiquette. I couldn't be rude. However, after I left the mourning hall, I had some doubts. According to etiquette, the filial son who wore mourning clothes in front of the mourning hall should be the deceased's eldest son or grandson. I had heard from Zhang Wenfei that Grandpa Zhao Dingwu didn't have any children. He had treated the two of them as his own. Thus, the filial son here should be Zhang Canwen. However, it was strange that the one who had offered me the incense was a kid around 17 or 18 years old. I couldn't help but feel suspicious. I pulled a young man and asked him, "Fellow Taoist, is the filial son in the mourning hall Grandpa Zhao's son?" After hearing my question, the young man looked at me strangely. Then he answered, "Of course not. Zhao Dingwu didn't have any children. That's Vice President Zhang's youngest son. He's just playing the role of a filial son." Then the young man seemed to be afraid of something. He didn't want to talk more. He waved his hand and left. Seeing his strange behavior, I was also puzzled. I didn't ask anyone else, but looked around. However, I didn't see Zhang Wenfei or Zhang Canwen. Zhang Wenfei and his fellow disciple hadn't appeared in Grandpa Zhao's mourning hall. No matter what, it didn't make sense. I was even more puzzled. I found a chance to talk to a middle-aged man who had just come out of the mourning hall. After talking to him, I discreetly asked him about Grandpa Zhao's death. I just wanted to ask him a random question as an excuse to talk to him. However, I didn't expect that the man would sigh and say, "I heard it was a disaster that destroyed his entire family. I don't know who Uncle Zhao had offended." Sigh. Chapter 216. It took me a long time to recover from this sudden grievous news. I didn't have the time to think about whether or not there was anything strange about this matter. I directly pulled this person over and asked, since it was a massacre, did Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei also meet with misfortune? The person was surprised. Then he shook his head. "You misunderstood. Uncle Zhao had a younger brother and two nephews. They usually lived together, but they were all killed this time. As for Uncle Zhao's two outstanding disciples, one was at the Metaphysics Union in the capital, and the other had left to travel a few days ago. I don't think they were involved." I heaved a sigh of relief. However, I was still a little suspicious. At the beginning of the exchange competition, Zhang Canwen had returned to Guangdong, and a few days ago, the two of them had rushed to Meizhou through the night. Did the people here not know about this? After sorting out my thoughts, I asked this person, "Do you know the secret behind Grandpa Zhao's death? Or have you heard any rumors?" After hearing my question, the person shook his head. "I don't know anything." Then he hurriedly left. Whether it was the young man from before or the middle-aged man, when they talked about this matter, their expressions became strange. Although they didn't say anything, their expressions proved that there was a secret behind this matter. Since I was at the Meizhou branch, I guessed that I wouldn't get any results even if I continued to ask. I stood up and left. After meeting up with Wang Kuan outside, I called a taxi to return to the hotel. I asked Wang Kuan to drive the car and stay here to observe the movements of the Meizhou branch. A few days ago, during the exchange competition, I had used up a lot of the talismans I had on hand. After returning to the hotel, I didn't dare to waste any more time. I worked overnight to make enough talismans. Then, I used the True Dragon's Vein and the Jade Bracelet to replenish my Tao energy. After the sun rose the next day, I hurried back to the Meizhou branch. Halfway there, Wang Kuan called me. He told me that the people of the Meizhou branch were carrying a coffin out of the door. It seemed that they were going to send a funeral. I felt strange. Yesterday, we held a memorial service. Today, we have to take the coffin out of the coffin. Isn't that a bit too hasty? According to the funeral rites of the Hakka, after holding the funeral in the mourning hall, monks and Taoists should be invited to chant sutras, burn money, and do vegetarian rituals to expiate souls. It usually takes a few days before it is time to take the coffin out. Although feng shui masters don't need monks or Taoists to expiate souls, it is normal for the body to be kept for a few days to receive more worship. It is really inappropriate to take the coffin out in such a hurry. What's more, it is only 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. After pondering for a while, I got Wang Kuan to drive up to them first. "Don't hang up the phone. Tell me the address at any time. I'll rush over here." When I met up with Wang Kuan, half an hour had passed. The funeral procession had left the city and was moving slowly on a quiet road in the suburbs. Since there weren't many people and carriages in the suburbs, we didn't dare to follow too closely. We stayed far behind them until they entered a cemetery. We didn't dare to follow them, so we had to stop outside. After stopping the car, I looked at the cemetery in front of me. I felt a little sad. As a feng shui master, he had spent his whole life searching for the dragon's acupoints. He had to prepare a few good places to protect his descendants after he died. It was a pity that Mr. Zhao had suffered a great calamity. After he died, he could only be buried in this cemetery. There were not many good graves with good feng shui. Moreover, in a good feng shui place, there were only 1 or 2 places that could be used as acupoints. In a cemetery where hundreds or even thousands of people were buried, the feng shui wouldn't be good. As a feng shui master, he couldn't find a good place to rest after he died. It was really sad. I guess the funeral procession wouldn't come out for a while. We had to wait outside in silence. As Wang Kuan had stayed up all night, he couldn't stand it anymore. I asked him to go to the back of the car to sleep. I sat there alone and waited. The Hakka people paid attention to funerals. When they were buried, there were many procedures. However, Mr. Zhao's funeral procession was simple. At noon, the procession that had entered the cemetery left. I hid there and observed for a long time. Since I wasn't familiar with the people in the Meizhou branch, I didn't find any valuable clues. Wang Kuan woke up around dusk. We went to get something to eat, then returned to the cemetery. Wang Kuan drove the car to wait for me outside while I sneaked into the cemetery. Although there were graves everywhere, the newly deceased had a different aura. Soon, I found Mr. Zhao's grave. When I reached the gravestone, I used my Tao energy to isolate the surroundings. Then, I sat cross-legged and took out a talisman I had prepared last night. I wanted to use it to summon Mr. Zhao's soul. It was a plan I had come up with yesterday. No matter what the reason was, Mr. Zhao would know. Instead of blindly investigating, it was better to summon his soul and ask. A feng shui master soul was much stronger than an ordinary person's. That was why it was much more difficult to summon his soul. Fortunately, Mr. Zhao was different. He hadn't comprehended the Tao energy to enter the Earth Master realm. He was just an ordinary feng shui master. Although his soul was stronger than an ordinary person's, it wasn't difficult for me to summon his soul. It was different from the time I had summoned Tong Tong's mother's soul. At that time, I hadn't comprehended the Tao energy yet. I could only use the blood of the deceased as a guide and the soul summoning spell. But now I didn't need to do that. I just needed a talisman to summon his soul. After I guided the Tao energy in my hand, the soul summoning talisman glowed and turned into ashes, falling on Mr. Zhao's gravestone. At the same time, an ash-gray light diffused and seeped into the soil under the gravestone. Everything seemed to be going well. However, after a few minutes, I furrowed my brows. Mr. Zhao's soul hadn't appeared. The soul summoning talisman had failed. How could it be? Mr. Zhao had just died, and his soul was still connected to his body. If I were to summon his soul in front of his grave, it should have been easy. I had never thought that something like this would happen. After thinking for a while, I understood something. No matter what, Mr. Zhao was a metaphysician. Although he didn't understand the Tao, the geomancy masters around him were all cultivators. I guess the enemy who had destroyed his family wasn't a good person. To hide something, the murderer had thought of the soul summoning method. He had used some tricks to seal or scatter Mr. Zhao's soul. He had directly cut off the possibility of summoning his soul. After understanding this, I couldn't help but feel dispirited. I sat there and pondered for a while. Then, I cleaned the ashes of the talismans in front of the gravestone and left the public cemetery. I went with Wang Kuan to the city to rest. The next morning, I went to the Meizhou branch again. Today, the place had returned to normal. There was no morning hall. Of course, I couldn't sneak in. So, I asked Wang Kuan to pretend that I was here to find someone to check the geomancy. After asking around in the shops for a long time and spending a lot of money, I finally got the address of Mr. Zhao's former residence. Then, we followed the address. The branch in Meizhou was close to the outskirts of the city. It didn't take us long to find the address. It was a small villa in the outskirts of the city. Although it was a villa, the house in the courtyard was a traditional Hakka building. It was simple and unadorned. It looked more like a warm farmhouse. Since I didn't know the situation, I asked Wang Kuan to stop the car far away. Then, I sneaked into the house alone. The courtyard's door wasn't locked and was only ajar. I frowned and didn't dare to directly push the door open. Instead, I hid my aura and climbed up the wall. After confirming that there was no one in the courtyard, I silently jumped down and walked towards the 3-story building. As soon as I reached the end of the corridor, I sensed that there were people in the room. There was also a fluctuation of Tao energy. There should be a feng shui master here. Based on the complexity of the auras, there was more than one person. Previously, the person from the branch in Meizhou had said that Mr. Zhao's family had been annihilated. Why was there a feng shui master in his former residence? I was even more careful. Following the fluctuation of Tao energy, I held my breath and focused until I reached an ajar door on the 2nd floor. I peeked through the crack of the door. There were a total of 4 people in the room. They were sitting cross-legged in a circle. All of them had their eyes closed. Their hands were folded in front of their abdomens. Looking at their appearances, it was clear that they were using their Tao energy to do something. As I got closer, I was able to clearly sense the ripples of their powers of the way. I was also able to determine their level of cultivation. 2 of them were about the same level as me, at the later stage of the sealing acupoint realm. As for the other 2, I could clearly sense that one of them was at the great circle of the sealing acupoint realm. The last person made me frown. I couldn't accurately sense this person's realm. However, based on the dense Tao energy fluctuations on his body, I could roughly determine that he was at the glory consciousness realm. With my cultivation realm, I would have been sensed by these people the moment I entered the courtyard. Fortunately, the dark green energy was concealing me. That was why I was able to make my way to the door. According to the rules and regulations of the Metaphysics Society, the branch would normally only have one person at the glory consciousness realm as the president. Furthermore, that person would be older when they reached the glory consciousness realm and would have almost no room for improvement. As for those with better talent who had reached the glory consciousness realm, they would almost all be transferred to the headquarters to take on the position of a director. On one hand, it would increase the headquarters' power. On the other hand, it would provide a better cultivation environment for these people. Under this kind of system, a mere Meizhou branch would have to send out all of their elites if they wanted to put together such a lineup. Perhaps these people weren't even from the Meizhou branch. Instead, there were local metaphysics families or sections. I didn't have the time to think about their backgrounds. I stuck my head out to take a look. I noticed that there seemed to be something in the center of the group of people. However, I couldn't see it clearly from my angle. Helpless, I could only hide at the door and silently wait. After around 20 minutes, an old man with his back facing me suddenly coughed painfully a few times. He even coughed out a mouthful of blood. After he calmed down, he stood up and said in a flustered and exasperated manner, "The highest realm of that Zhao Dingwu's lineage is only at the intermediate stage of glorious memory. Why is this restriction so powerful that we can't break it even with the combined strength of the 4 of us?" I didn't pay too much attention to his grumbling. As he stood up, the thing in the center of the group of 4 was finally revealed to me. I was extremely familiar with this item. I had personally used it several times. It was Zhang Wenfei's personal magic tool, the Yin Yang Yama Luo brush. Chapter 217. Without waiting for me to react, the other 3 people also stood up at the same time. The middle-aged man with the perfect acupoint pressing realm said, "Elder Lu, don't be impatient. That Zhao Wenshan's lineage met with a calamity a few decades ago and is now lacking in talent. However, in the early years, he was the leader of our guest metaphysics world. No matter if it's spells or magic tools, he naturally has his own strengths. We can't break this restriction for now, but there's no need to be angry. Wait for President Zhang to deal with things over there and come back, then we'll think of something." President Zhang? Hearing this name, my heart froze. Previously in the morning hall, I heard that the filial son was President Zhang's youngest son, so I had some suspicions. Could it be that Old Man Zhao's death had something to do with President Zhang? I've heard Zhang Wenfei mention the Meizhou branch's president before. His name is Zhang Bingsheng, and he seems to have some sort of relationship with Zhang Wenfei. However, I've never met him, so I don't have a clear impression of him. What made me even more uneasy was that although Zhang Wenfei and Old Man Zhao were from the Wenshan lineage, they were also members of the Metaphysics Society. If this was really done by Zhang Bingsheng, then wouldn't it be internal strife in the metaphysics world? The Metaphysics Society had always had strict rules, and Zhang Canwen was a director of the headquarters, while Zhang Bingsheng was just a small branch president. Where did he get the guts from? Also, from what the middle-aged man said, the Glory of Consciousness Realm elder was clearly not Zhang Bingsheng, but some elder Lu. How could the Meizhou branch have two people in the Glory of Consciousness Realm? From the looks of it, there was probably an external power involved in this matter. At this moment, the Glory of Consciousness Realm elder Lu nodded and said, "Fine, we'll wait for President Zhang to come back before we deal with it. You three be careful. I'll meditate and heal my injuries." With that, he sat down cross-legged again. Before he closed his eyes, he said to the yin-yang yama brush that was wrapped in a halo of light, "Surnamed Zhao, I advise you not to resist anymore. No matter how strong this restriction of yours is, it will be opened sooner or later. Now that you've opened it, I can still make the decision to send you into reincarnation. If you persist in going about things the wrong way, when we forcefully break the restriction in the future, it won't be that easy for your soul to dissipate." His words startled me. What kind of barrier is Mr. Zhao's soul hiding in? No wonder I failed to summon the soul. It wasn't the culprit who did something to it, but he fused his soul into the restriction to protect this magic tool. I frowned and pondered for a while. When I looked up, Old Man Lu had already closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. At this moment, among the four of them, two were at the 9 apertures acupuncture point realm. One was at the completed acupuncture point realm, and the last was at the Glory of Consciousness realm. The 3 people in the acupuncture point realm aren't much of a threat. I have the confidence to deal with them alone. Only the old man in the Glory of Consciousness realm is a problem. Although his pupils are strong, he has just reached the Ghost King realm after all. It isn't a problem to deal with ghosts, but against a feng shui master, I'm afraid he can only barely fight with the early stage of Glory of Consciousness. As for this old man surnamed Lu, I can't see through his strength. If he is at the middle stage of the glorious memory realm, and I make a move rashly, I'm afraid I won't be able to gain any advantage. Fortunately, he was currently recuperating from his injuries, which gave me a chance. With the protection of the dark green energy, Tong Tong, and I could ambush him. Even if Old Man Lu is at the middle stage of Glory of Consciousness, if we attacked him, we could hurt him or even kill him. I didn't like to take risks, but Mr. Zhao's soul was in the restriction. These people said that Zhang Bingsheng would come back soon. At that time, I was afraid I wouldn't even have a chance to ambush him. Only by fighting with his life on the line might he be able to save old Master Zhao's soul, and the truth of what had happened would come to light. After making up my mind, I called Tong Tong and told her about my plan to ambush him. Tong Tong always listened to me. She didn't care if it was dangerous or not. It was the same this time. After I told her, she didn't say a word. She quietly urged the yin energy in her body, creating a dark ball of light in her hands. Then, she nodded and said to me, "Brother, I'm ready." I also took out the pure yang talisman I had prepared earlier. I used the dark green energy to isolate the surroundings. At the same time, I read the pure yang divine spell and made a pure yang hand seal. Soon, the pure yang karma flame condensed on my fingertips. Once everything was ready, aside from the old man surnamed Lu, the other 3 sat down cross-legged and began to recover their Dao Qi. It was the best chance to ambush him. I didn't have to worry anymore. I covered Tong Tong and my body with the dark green energy to ensure that no wisp of their aura leaked out. Then, I took Tong Tong and quietly sneaked into the room. Tong Tong, and I didn't make a sound. With the dark green energy isolating our auras, the other 4 didn't react even when we arrived in front of Old Man Lu. The dark green energy was perfect at isolating Tao energy. However, cultivators had an instinctive reaction to danger. I didn't dare to move forward. I stopped and directly pressed the pure yang karma flame in my hands toward Old Man Lu's body. At the same time, I secretly told Tong Tong to take action. Tong Tong didn't slow down. The dark ball of light in her hands turned into a black talisman. Together with my pure yang karma flame, she pressed it toward Old Man Lu's forehead. Talisman techniques could only be used by cultivators. I had never heard of ghosts using such techniques. Tong Tong had never used them before. However, judging from the aura of the black talisman, it was even denser than the heavenly Een energy that Tong Tong had used to defeat the well ghost. It was likely that she had cultivated this technique after she had advanced to the Ghost King realm. The two of us attacked at the same time. Intense Tao energy and Een energy fluctuated, causing a great commotion. Old Man Lu suddenly opened his eyes. However, before he could react, the pure yang karma flame and the black talisman reached him at the same time. He only had time to read half of the spell when a scarlet flame rose from his body. At the same time, a wisp of black energy reached him and enveloped half of his body. Old Man Lu immediately screamed. Half of his body was enveloped in the cold, black energy, while the other half was enveloped in the scarlet flame. It looked extremely strange. The loud sound caused the other 3 people in the room to stand up. However, after successfully ambushing Old Man Lu, the other 3 were no longer a concern. I didn't rush to take action. Instead, I stood to the side with Tong Tong, on guard to prevent Old Man Lu from counterattacking in a desperate situation. However, it was obvious that I was overthinking. Regardless of whether it was the pure yang karma flame or the black talisman in Tong Tong's hands, they were extremely powerful. They were enough to cause fatal damage to someone in the glorious memory realm. Old Man Lu had no way of fighting back. He could only desperately resist the 2 Een and Yang techniques. The Tao energy on his body grew weaker and weaker. In the end, he closed his eyes and fainted. Truth be told, the old man, surnamed Lu's reaction was already very fast in a situation where he was ambushed. Unfortunately, whether it was hand seals, talismans, or spells, they all required a process. Only when one reached the Celestial Master Realm and could use a one-word spell would they be able to do it instantly. Old Man Lu hadn't reached the Heavenly Master Realm, so the outcome was already decided. Of course, this didn't mean that Tong Tong and I could deal with any glorious memory realm feng shui master. This Old Man Lu was obviously below the 3-star realm. As long as he was above the 3-star realm, he would be able to block the pure yang karma flame and the black talisman. If he attacked Tong Tong and me, we would be the ones to lose. The situation wasn't clear yet, so I didn't kill him. After Old Man Lu fainted, I turned to attack the other 3. Seeing that Tong and I had successfully ambushed the old man surnamed Lu, the remaining 3 naturally knew that they were no match for us. Seeing that I was about to make a move, the 3 of them tacitly made the same choice, and that was to run. The 3 of them rushed towards the door. However, as they were all feng shui masters of the pressure point realm, their speed couldn't compare to mine, let alone my magic tool. I waved the heavenly fan in my hand, and the lonely grave map appeared, trapping the 3 of them within. Tong Tong also chased after them, and with a wave of the 2 black chains in his hands, he wrapped them around the 3's bodies and dragged them back. When the 3 of them returned to me, the Tao Qi in their bodies had already been completely sealed by Tong Tong. They fell to the ground in exhaustion, and all of them had expressions of defeat. In the end, it was the middle-aged man who had completed the pressure point realm who sat up and carefully said to me, "Taoist friend, why did you ambush us? Is there a misunderstanding?" I shook my head and chuckled, but didn't reply to his question. I only told Tong Tong to look after them. Then I got up and walked to the Yin-Yang Yama brush that was surrounded by a halo of light. I asked, "Is Old Man Zhao here? I'm a good friend of Zhang Wenfei, and we met once before. I wonder if Old Man Zhao still remembers me?" After I asked this question, No sound came from the yin-yang yama brush. Instead, old man Zhao's urgent voice appeared in my mind. He said to me, "Little friend Zhou, it's not good to stay here for long. I will remove the restriction now. Quickly take the yin-yang yama brush and leave this place. I will tell you the details later." Old man Zhao was obviously very clear about the current situation, and he urged me to leave as soon as he spoke. I originally wanted to interrogate the 4 people in the room, but since old man Zhao had said so, I could only give up. After the halo of the yin-yang yama brush disappeared, I reached out and grabbed it. Then I lifted my feet and was about to leave. However, after leaving, I was a little hesitant. Although I didn't know the specific details, the 4 people in the room had seen my appearance. With my reputation in the metaphysics world, as long as they wanted to, it would be easy for them to find out my identity. Since the day my parents died, I had become more and more careful. It was best to eliminate this kind of danger in the bud. In short, I would be most at ease if I killed the 4 of them. However, this was 4 lives after all, so I was still a little hesitant. At this moment, the 3 people who were still conscious clearly saw through my thoughts. It was the middle-aged man who had sealed his acupoints completely. He suddenly stood up from the ground and said to me in a threatening manner, "Fellow Taoist, do you know the background of this elder Lu that you ambushed? He is a member of the Lu family in the capital. I advise you to be smart and run away now. It's not too late. If you have any crooked thoughts, you should know the power of the Lu family in the capital, since you are also a person of the metaphysics world. When the time comes, you will have nowhere to hide." Hearing his words, I was stunned at first, and then my eyes quickly turned blood red. The Lu family in the capital. Lu Jinyang. The scene from a few months ago instantly appeared in front of me. After a moment of silence, I took out the Pure Yang talisman and chanted the Pure Yang incantation. In an instant, the Pure Yang karma fire appeared on my fingertip. The middle-aged man seemed to realize that something was wrong. He wanted to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. I directly waved the Pure Yang karma fire. In the blink of an eye, the 3 people screamed and burned into a sea of fire. After dealing with the 3 of them, I turned my head and looked at the unconscious old man, surnamed Lu, lying on the ground. Chapter 218. After leaving with Elder Lu, I didn't dare to return to the hotel. Instead, I asked Wang Kuan to drive to the outskirts of the city. Finally, I found a secluded call and parked my car. I asked Wang Kuan to wait for me in the car while I carried the charred Elder Lu inside. The sneak attack from Tong Tong, and I had made him faint and lose his ability to fight, but in fact he had only used up his Dao Qi. The injuries on his body were not serious, and he had already recovered. Thus, when I threw him to the ground, he coughed lightly and woke up. "Who are you?" After waking up, Elder Lu's eyes were in a daze for a moment, but he quickly reacted to the situation. He sat on the ground and used his hands and feet to retreat. Unfortunately, he was in a cramped call, and after a few steps, his back was against the mountain wall. I didn't answer him and just sat in front of him. I lit a cigarette and asked, "Tell me, what's your name and position in the Lu family?" The man's face twitched, but he quickly hid the fear on his face. He put on a smile and hastily replied, "My name is Lu Zifeng. I'm the twin brother of Patriarch Lu Ziang. Taoists capture me here for no reason. Is there a misunderstanding?" This person was actually Lu Ziang's younger brother. Lu Ziang was Lu Jinyang's grandfather and also the Lu family's patriarch. He was rumored to be the celestial master of the current dynasty. After saying that, Lu Zifeng seemed to gain some confidence. He slowly stood up and said, "If there really is a misunderstanding, our Lu family isn't unreasonable. Let's just talk about it. If this Taoist doesn't mind, let's be friends. If you need our Lu family's help in the future, just say the word." However, I just coldly looked at him and didn't answer his question. I simply described the black-clothed old man who had gone with Lu Jinyang to my house. Lu Zifeng, who that person is. I asked Lu Zifeng who he is. Lu Zifeng quickly told me that person was his 3rd brother, Lu Zining. At that time, I heard Lu Xingyang call that person third grandpa. It seemed that Lu Zifeng didn't lie to me. However, this made my heart even heavier. The Lu family's patriarch was a celestial master, and I already felt that revenge was hopeless. Now, it seemed that the Lu family's foundation was far beyond my imagination. Facing such a powerful Lu family, no matter how strong my will was, I couldn't help but waver. However, I quickly regained my resolve. As a son, if I couldn't even take revenge for my parents' blood, I would be a complete failure in life. No matter how powerful the Lu family was, I couldn't be the slightest bit afraid. Shaking my head, I pushed the distracting thoughts aside and asked Lu Zifeng, "Tell me, why did your Lu family attack when Shan's family? Did you kill Lord Zhao?" The smile on Lu Zifeng's face froze. He asked with some bewilderment, "Fellow Taoist, are you old friends with Wen Shan's lineage?" I coldly glanced at him. "Answer my question." Lu Zifeng's voice became hoarse. I only received a notice from the clan to bring people to Meizhou to help Zhang Bingsheng. I didn't know what was going on before I came. Also, I wasn't the one who killed Zhao Dingwu. Is that so? The corner of my mouth raised into a mocking smile. Since Zhang Bingsheng came to find the Lu family, it was clear that he couldn't deal with Wen Shan's branch alone. You came to help, but didn't do anything. Do you believe that? Lu Zifeng hastily waved his hand at me and hastily said, "I didn't come alone. My third brother, Lu Xining's eldest son, Lu Qingping, came with me. He's at the 4-star knowledge realm, and his strength far surpasses mine. He and Zhang Bingsheng worked together to deal with Wen Shan's branch. I was only responsible for dealing with the aftermath." Lu Qingping, Lu Xining's eldest son? My heart jumped. A few months had passed, and I thought that the chance to take revenge on the Lu family was still far away. I didn't think that the chance would come to me so quickly. Lu Zifeng was only the younger brother of Lu Ziyang and Lu Zining. Killing him wouldn't have much of an impact on the Lu family, but if this Lu Changping were to die, Lu Zining would lose his son in his old age. But according to what Lu Zifeng said, he was at the 4-star knowledge realm. It wouldn't be easy to kill him, so I had to think about it. Then, I carefully asked about the Lu family. Lu Zifeng most likely felt the killing intent in my words, so he didn't dare to hide anything and told me everything. According to what he said, in the generation of the Lu family's old man, Lu Zining and his 2 brothers were all at the Sky Master realm. Not only that, in the 2nd generation, Lu Ziyang's eldest son, Lu Qingyi, was also at the Sky Master realm. A family with 4 Sky Masters. What kind of power was that? Apart from that, in the 2nd generation of the Lu family, there were many who were at the glory of knowledge realm. This power was terrifying. Even so, Zhang Wenfei had told me that the Lu family was one of the top metaphysical families that didn't have much foundation. From this, one could see how strong the metaphysical families that had been passed down for thousands of years were. When I got the title of Young Phoenix, I thought that Han Wenan and Zhang Kunlun weren't that talented, and that their future would be limited. But now, it seemed that in such a family, even if their talent wasn't as good as mine, their future achievements wouldn't be any worse than mine. After I asked all the questions, Lu Zifeng was no longer useful to me. The pure yang karmic fire surged from my fingertip and pressed on his head. Lu Zifeng's face was filled with shock, and he quickly got up to resist. However, he had used up all of his Dao Qi, and he had recovered less than 1/10 of it. He barely resisted for a few seconds before the Dao Qi in his body was used up again. The pure yang yi fire wrapped around his head, and it burned fiercely. He screamed tragically. I just stood there quietly. My eyes were extremely calm, until Lu Zifeng's head was burned to ashes by the pure yang karmic fire. I gently blew on it. The ashes floated down, and Lu Zifeng's body became a headless corpse. Next, I searched his body. In the end, this 1st-generation member of the Lu family, who was at the glory of knowledge realm, was really pitiful. He didn't have anything decent on him. After killing Liang Kaixiong, I was marked by his ghost mark. Later, I relied on luck to escape. At this moment, I was afraid that Lu Zifeng had something similar on him, so I didn't dare to stay for long. After searching, I immediately returned to the car and hurriedly left. When I returned to the hotel, I took out the yin-yang yama brush and wanted to ask Old Man Zhao what had happened. In the end, after communicating, Old Man Zhao asked me first. Little friend Zhou Yi, your methods just now were too cruel. Do you have enmity with the Liu family? Cruel? I smiled coldly and answered, absolutely irreconcilable. Old Man Zhao seemed to be stunned and didn't speak for a long time. Then he sighed. Never mind. It's good that you don't get blinded by hatred. I had always respected Old Man Zhao, but when it came to the Liu family, anyone's advice was like the wind passing my ears. I definitely wouldn't take it to heart. After nodding, I changed the topic to Wan Shan's group. I hurriedly asked him what had happened. Lord Zhao was silent for a moment before he opened his mouth and said, it's a long story. Let's talk about it this time. You should have more or less understood it. It was that Zhang Bingsheng who colluded with the Liu family and secretly imprisoned me. Then, he sent a message to Qin Wen and Wen Fei. After they returned to Mei Province, Zhang Bingsheng's true intentions were revealed. He worked together with the Liu family to kill the three of us. Hearing him say this, my heart tightened. I quickly interrupted and asked, what's the situation with Zhang Wenfei and his fellow disciple now? In terms of feelings, Zhang Wenfei and I were the closest. After seeing the yin-yang yama brush, my thoughts were always on him. At this time, Old Man Zhao was silent again. After a long time, his sorrowful voice came again. That day, Wenfei died in battle. Qianwen ran out of energy. Then, to avoid the humiliation of the inherited magic tool, I used my remnant soul to open the yin-yang yama brush's restriction. I don't know what happened after that. Old Man Zhao had never married in his life. He had always treated Zhang Wenfei and his fellow disciple as his own. The grief of losing a son in his old age couldn't be described with words. Chapter 219. After talking about this, Mr. Zhao's voice didn't come back for a long time. I sat there in a daze. My mind kept replaying all the things that had happened since I met Zhang Wenfei. I couldn't say a word. After a long time, I clenched my teeth and spoke first. Grandpa, tell me what exactly happened. Master Zhao's voice was sorrowful as he continued to tell me about the tragedy that had happened in Mount Wen's branch. The Mount Wen branch worshipped the famous Wen Tianxiang. Many people knew that Wen Tianxiang was a patriotic poet, a famous general who fought against the Jin dynasty, and a leader of the literary and political circles at the end of the Southern Song dynasty. However, not many people knew that he was also a master of metaphysics. Wen Tianxiang's first name was Yun Sun, and his courtesy name was Song Rui. He called himself Mount Wen, or Taoist Fuxiao. According to legend, Old Zhao's branch was inherited by Wen Tianxiang, a disciple of the Xianmen school. They took the name Mount Wen and got the name Mount Wen. After the fall of the Southern Song dynasty, they moved south and eventually settled in Meizhou. Since the Southern Song dynasty, the Mount Wen branch had been passed on for more than 1,000 years. Dozens of years ago, they were the leaders of the Xianmen school in Meizhou. Later on, when China's mainland was ravaged by the flames of war, Wen Shan's lineage inherited the will of their ancestors. Many of them died for the country. This caused their vitality to be greatly damaged and their orthodoxy to wither. They almost lost their inheritance. When the flames of war were extinguished, Wen Shan's lineage was only left with Master Zhao's lineage. Old Zhao's master was called Zhang Wenyuan, and he was known as Daoist Xuemei in the Xianmen school. Since he was from Meizhou, he had a withered winter sweet branch. During the war-torn era, not only did he fight against Japanese warlocks, but he also violated the rules of the Xianmen school by attacking ordinary Japanese soldiers. Wherever he went, snowflakes bloomed like winter sweet. That was how he got his name. Old Zhao was Daoist Xuemei's eldest disciple. Besides Old Zhao, Daoist Xuemei Zhang Wenyuan had two sons. The eldest was called Zhang Bingxian, and the youngest was Zhang Bingxian. He was the current president of the Xianmen school branch in Meizhou. As fellow disciples of the same sect, one of the reasons Zhang Bingxian had tried to kill Lord Zhao was because of Daoist Xuemei's eldest son, Zhang Bingxian. As mentioned earlier, after the chaotic era ended, Zhang Wenyuan was the only remaining branch of the Wenshan lineage. He inherited almost all of the Wenshan lineage's inheritance, including precious techniques and magic tools. During the war, Xiume Daoist, Zhang Wenyuan, had survived. However, her body had been seriously injured, and she could no longer make any progress in her cultivation. Therefore, she had stayed at home, taking care of her 3 disciples. With the support of the precious cultivation techniques and magical tools of Wenshan's lineage, Zhao Dingwu and the Zhang brothers had grown rapidly. Soon, they had become the dazzling stars of the southern metaphysics world. Among them, the one who showed the greatest talent was the ordinary geomancy master, Zhao Dingwu, who was not even a geomaster. Back then, there was no existence of the Metaphysics Association. Therefore, there were no records of the opening of acupoints during the baptism of Dragon Qi. However, according to Zhao Dingwu, he had been close to Yi Pianpian, a quasi-3 meridians talent. Zhang Bingxian's talent was not bad either, a quasi-2 meridians talent. In fact, because Zhang Bingxian had inherited Wenshan lineage's magical tool, the Yin-Yang Yama brush, he was even stronger than Zhao Dingwu. The two of them were known as the twin heroes of Wenshan and were very famous in the metaphysics world. Zhang Bingxian had been young at the time and had not been on the same level as the two of them. As for Zhao Dingwu and Zhang Bingxian, as fellow disciples of the same sect, they had a very good relationship. They had always been inseparable, cultivating together and improving rapidly. By the time they were 30, they had both entered the glory of knowledge realm. Just as the hope of the Wenshan lineage's revival was about to appear on the two of them had encountered a mysterious force during one of their travels. The other party had over 10 glory of knowledge realm geomancers, surrounding and killing the two of them. In an extremely dangerous situation, the two of them fought to the very last moment. At the very last moment, Zhang Bingxian had used his life as the price to activate a forbidden technique of the Wenshan lineage, killing several glory of knowledge earth geomancers. The others had all been heavily injured. After this, Zhao Dingwu had escaped back to Meizhou with Zhang Bingxian's belongings, saving his life. However, because his body had been too heavily injured, Zhao Dingwu had been unconscious for a month after escaping. When he woke up, the meridians in his body were blocked, his cultivation foundation completely destroyed. Daoist Xiume, Zhang Wenyuan, was already very old. In addition, she had been seriously injured several times during the chaotic years of war and had a hidden illness. When she heard that her most promising apprentice and son had been killed and her Dao foundation destroyed, her hidden illness flared up and she passed away. The Wenshan lineage that had just seen the hope of revival immediately fell from its limitless glory and was now in its most critical moment. Fortunately, the Wenshan lineage's historical reputation and their generosity in dying for the country during the chaotic times of war had a great influence in the southern metaphysical world. Even in such a state, their prestige in the metaphysical world was still very high. After such a tribulation, the Wenshan lineage still managed to pull through with the support of various parties in the metaphysical world. At this time, coincidentally, the Metaphysics Association was preparing to be established. Everyone in the Meizhou region elected Zhao Dingwu, who had his foundation destroyed and was already known as a cultivation cripple, as the first president, to show their respect for the Wenshan lineage. However, Zhao Dingwu rejected this proposal. Instead, he pushed forward his junior brother Zhang Bingcheng, who had just reached the age of 20. He pleaded with the entire southern metaphysical world to take care of Zhang Bingcheng, so that they could use him to once again revive the Wenshan lineage. Zhao Dingwu's attitude was firm, so the southern metaphysical world had no choice but to accept his proposal. Many metaphysical sects had the intention to nurture Zhang Bingcheng, and the Metaphysics Association had also listed Zhang Bingcheng as a candidate for the future president. After confirming this matter, Zhao Dingwu calmly stayed in the Meizhou Metaphysics Association as an ordinary member. While he was studying geomancy, He took Zhang Bingxian's two youngest sons as his disciples and taught them carefully every day. These two disciples were Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei. I was startled when I heard this. Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei were blood-related brothers. Moreover, Zhang Bingxian was their uncle. They belonged to the One Shan lineage, and they were their own flesh and blood. How did they end up in such a situation where they had to fight each other? I was puzzled. Old man Zhao continued to narrate. Back then, he had wanted to hand over all the inheritance of the One Shan lineage to Zhang Bingxian. But it was a pity that Zhang Bingxian's talent was far inferior to his and Zhang Bingxian's. Even though he had a famous teacher to nurture him from a young age, it was only when he was in his 20s that he barely entered the pressure point realm. Moreover, when he received the baptism of the Dragon Qi, he had only opened 6 meridians in his body, which could barely be considered as a 1-meridian talent. Under such circumstances, Zhang Bingxian was obviously unable to shoulder the heavy responsibility of reviving the One Shan lineage. Thus, Zhao Dingwu changed his mind and handed over the inheritance and magic tools to Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei, placing his hopes on the two of them. On the other hand, he didn't give up on Zhang Bingxian and relied on his prestige in the southern metaphysical world to send Zhang Bingxian to the glory of knowledge realm and successfully become the president of the Meizhou branch. From then on, Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei both displayed extraordinary talent. Everything seemed to be developing in a good direction, but it was a pity that Zhang Bingxian was extremely dissatisfied with all of this. In the beginning, he was only dissatisfied with Zhao Dingwu handing over the inheritance and magic tools of the One Shan lineage to Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei. Later on, he even questioned Zhao Dingwu to his face, saying that his brother Zhang Bingxian's death had been a trap set up by Zhao Dingwu. The reason was that Zhao Dingwu's talent had been stronger back then, but Zhang Wenyuan had cared about kinship and hadn't handed over the inheritance of the Wen Shan lineage to him, causing him to feel indignant and have evil thoughts. In these past few years, Zhang Bingxian had even expressed this view on many public occasions, completely falling out with Zhao Dingwu and even publicly withdrawing from the Wen Shan lineage. Even under such circumstances, Zhao Dingwu had never thought that Zhang Bingxian would actually act against him and his two nephews. Furthermore, in recent years, Zhang Canwen's strength had already reached the glory of knowledge realm, surpassing Zhang Bingxian. Under his intimidation, even if Zhang Bingxian had any evil thoughts, he didn't dare to act rashly. However, he hadn't thought that Zhang Bingxian would actually collude with the Lu family, ultimately disregarding kinship and acting against them. When Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei had been participating in the exchange competition in Shenzhen, the Lu family had sent out Lu Zifeng and Lu Chengping, two glory of knowledge realm martial artists. After meeting up with Zhang Bingxian, they had directly imprisoned Zhao Dingwu and laid down a trap, notifying Zhang Canwen and Zhang Wenfei that Zhao Dingwu was critically ill and for them to quickly return. When they had hurriedly returned to Mei Province, they had fallen head first into the trap that Zhang Bingxian had meticulously laid down. After a bitter battle, Zhang Wenfei had died in battle, and Zhang Canwen had fled with heavy injuries. Even the inherited magic tool, the yin-yang yama brush, had not been able to take it with him. In this sort of situation, Zhao Dingwu had used the secret inheritance technique of the Wan Shan lineage, using the price of his soul not being able to reincarnate for 10,000 years to lay down a seal around the yin-yang yama brush in an attempt to prevent the inherited magic tool from falling into Zhang Bingxian's hands. However, as time passed, the seal would dissipate one day. Of the Zhang Canwen brothers, one was dead and the other was heavily injured. There simply wasn't any hope of rescue. However, he hadn't thought that in this sort of situation I would appear. After listening to Grandpa Zhao's long story, my heart became gloomy. There would always be evil people in the world. Perhaps it was innate, but anything could become a catalyst for them to do evil, like Lu Xinyan, like Zhang Bingxian. Speaking of which, Zhang Bingxian was far worse than Lu Xinyan. Because of his own jealousy and greed, he had ignored kindness and familial love. He had killed Zhao Dingwu, who had helped him grow and become successful, and he had killed his own nephew. It was hard to imagine what sort of beast's heart was hidden beneath the human skin he wore. And from Zhang Bingqing's perspective, perhaps from the moment his father and brother died, a seed of hatred had been planted in his heart. Chapter 220. At the peak of his life, his master and junior brother, who were like his closest kin, both died. His cultivation and Tao foundation were destroyed. Old Man Zhao's experience was very similar to mine from a few months ago. However, he was even more unfortunate than me. He didn't have the saliva of the true dragon, so he was unable to recover his talent and cultivation for the rest of his life. Not only that, from then on, he had to bear the heavy pressure of the entire Wenshan lineage with the identity of an ordinary feng shui master. After 20 years of hardship, he finally saw the light of hope, but he suffered the heaviest betrayal. This time, the price he paid was his own life. However, even if he died, he couldn't just leave. He had to use the last of his soul to protect the inheritance of the Wenshan lineage. Old Man Zhao's life was very difficult and heavy. Just like he said, if it wasn't for Zhang Bingqing's hatred that clouded his mind, he wouldn't have suffered such a heavy price. That's why he sighed to me. However, it was a pity that I didn't agree with his words. I was different from Zhang Bingqing. He first lost his mind and then developed hatred. I, on the other hand, had no choice but to bear the hatred. To me, if I could get revenge, then so what if I lost my mind? After listening to the story, I was silent for a long time. In the end, I could only let out a long sigh. With a gloomy expression, I asked Old Man Zhao, "How long can this restriction last?" He used a secret technique to activate this restriction with the power of his own soul. Although I don't know the principles behind it, I have a general idea that the day the restriction dissipates is the day his soul dissipates. Old Man Zhao's voice wasn't too heavy. He just said with a bit of disappointment, "Originally, it could last for a few more days, but now, there's only about 10 days left." 10 days. I thought about it and said, I have enmity with the Liu family, and I'm also close friends with Wenfei. In 10 days, I'll get rid of Zhang Bingqing and the people from the Liu family one by one. I'll get revenge for Wenfei and myself. Facing Old Man Zhao, who had experienced many hardships in his life, I wanted to do something for him before I left. However, 10 days was too short. I couldn't bring Zhang Wenfei back from the dead, nor could I find the heavily injured Zhang Canwen. Perhaps the only thing I could do in time was to get revenge. Who would have thought that after Lord Zhao heard what I said, his voice became hurried, and he hastily said, "You're only in the pressure point realm. Even if you successfully ambushed Lu Zifeng with your ghost with the power of a ghost king, you won't have any chance against Lu Qingping, who's in the glorious knowledge realm." Although old Master Zhao was just an ordinary feng shui master, he still had the eyesight. What he said was not nonsense. I grinned. I have to try to know. At the very least, I have absolute confidence in dealing with Zhang Bingqing. Even if I can't defeat Lu Qingping, I have absolute confidence in escaping. It won't be too dangerous. Old Man Zhao was silent for a moment, but in the end, he shook his head and said to me solemnly, "Little friend Zhou Yi, I'm already a dead man. My soul can't exist for too long, so I don't have time to get revenge. If you really want to help me, you might as well help me find Canwen." That day, I escaped in a hurry. I have something to tell him. Also, this inherited magic tool can't be passed down in our generation. Because of his insistence, I could only agree to help him find Zhang Canwen's tracks for the next few days and temporarily ignore the matter of revenge. Through the sensing of Tao energy, as long as Zhang Canwen appeared within 10 meters of me, I would be able to detect him. However, Zhang Canwen was on the run, so he would definitely hide his tracks. Moreover, compared to the sensing range of 10 meters, the entire Meizhou, or even the entire Guangdong, was too big. It was almost impossible to find Zhang Canwen by relying on my own power. Thus, after thinking for a while, I called Wang Yongjun and asked him if he had enough people in Meizhou to help me with this matter. Wang Yongjun was as straightforward as ever. He immediately told me that he didn't have any property or people here, but he had many business partners. If I gave him one day, he would be able to find enough people to help me with this matter. I nodded and thanked him, then hung up the phone. After asking in detail the location and direction that Zhang Kanwen had escaped to on the day of the accident, I went out and rushed to the scene. After carefully investigating, I slowly searched in the direction that Zhang Kanwen had escaped in. It was impossible that Zhang Bingsheng and the people of the Liu family hadn't searched this route. They hadn't found anything on that day, let alone after so many days. After spending the entire afternoon, I didn't find any valuable clues. The next morning, just as I was about to set off to search again, I received a call from Xie Changhua. He told me that he had met up with Liu Chuanda in Shenzhen. He asked me where I was. After listening to him, I realized that the 1 week that I had promised Xie Changhua and Liu Chuanda was already up. I thought for a while, then told them to rush to Meizhou. These two were former guild leaders, and their power had reached the glory of consciousness realm. If they rushed over now, they should be able to help with the search for Zhang Kanwen. More importantly, if something happened with the two of them around, my power would increase a lot. Because of the restrictions that Tong had placed in their bodies, the two of them were even more enthusiastic and flattering than before. After the agreement, they only used one morning to rush over. In the next few days, they all participated in the search. With their participation, and the people that Wang Yongjun had arranged to work together, it seemed that the hope of finding Zhang Kanwen was much higher. However, it was a pity that 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Even when the 10 days were up and the restrictions on the Yin-Yang Yama brush had dimmed to the extreme, we still hadn't found Zhang Kanwen. It was as if he had vanished in a thin air. On the last day, I didn't take Grandpa Zhao out, but silently stayed with him. We sat in the hotel room and prepared to send him off on his last journey. Due to the dissipation of the restriction, Zhao Dingwu's voice could barely be heard. However, he still sat there, muttering something to himself. His expression was one of confusion, one of anger, and one of relief. Looking at him, I felt even more sad. Finding Zhang Kanwen was the old man's last wish. It was a pity that I hadn't been able to help him with such a small matter. People had the last radiance of the setting sun, and so did ghosts. At noon that day, when the restrictions on the Yin-Yang Yama brush were so faint that they couldn't be seen, Grandpa Zhao's soul suddenly jumped out of the Yin-Yang Yama brush. It looked as if his soul had solidified, no longer as illusory as before. He sighed and then told me, "You should know that I'm looking for Zhang Kanwen for the inheritance of Wen Shan's lineage. After this incident, he's the only one left of Wen Shan's lineage. Unfortunately, my lineage has suffered a setback. I'm afraid that our lineage will really be cut off now. Fine, I'll do my best and leave it to fate. Little friend Zhou Yi, after I leave, keep this Yin-Yang Yama brush. You can use it for yourself or collect it. Also, I will tell you where the true inheritance of Mount Wen is. If you want, you can go find it yourself. I only ask one thing. After I leave, do your best to find Kanwen. If you can find him, do your best to help him maintain the inheritance of Mount Wen." After saying that, Grandpa Zhao felt that he didn't have time. He didn't even wait for my reply and directly said to me, "After you enter the glory of consciousness realm, guide your Tao energy into this Yin-Yang Yama brush and carefully comprehend it. You will find that there are other mysteries. You'll have to figure out the details yourself. I can only tell you that this is a secret that my Mount Wen has guarded for 1,000 years. It is also a responsibility that my Mount Wen has carried for 1,000 years. In the future, when you see that item, you will understand the reason." As he spoke, the dense halo of light around the Yin-Yang Yama brush completely disappeared. Old Master Zhao's figure also gradually faded until he became transparent and disappeared in the air. After he completely disappeared, I faintly heard Grandpa Zhao's final murmur. Chapter 221. Heaven and earth have righteous energy, giving form to chaos. Below are rivers and mountains, and above are the sun and stars. People call it righteous, filling the sky. The road to the throne is clear, containing peace and spitting out the Ming court. At the end of time, I see it one by one in painting. After old Zhao's figure disappeared, I followed his last murmur and read the full text of Wen Tianxiang's Song of Righteousness. In the entire history of Huaxia, Wen Tianxiang was the only one who single-handedly supported the entire nation. As for old Zhao, he was the descendant of Wen Shan, who had inherited Wen Tianxiang's metaphysics. Although he hadn't experienced the changes of time, he had been loyal all his life. He was worthy of being the descendant of Wen Gong. Not only had he inherited Wen Tianxiang's metaphysics, but he had also inherited Wen Tianxiang's righteous energy. Standing in the narrow room of the hotel, I bowed deeply to the dimming yin-yang yama brush. When I lifted my head, my eyes were cold. Since ancient times, heroes didn't have a hard time dealing with beauties, but with villains. Old Zhao had worked hard his whole life. He had gone through many trials and tribulations. All he wanted was to maintain the inheritance of Wen Shan. According to him, when Wen Shan's branch was hit hard, the entire Southern metaphysics world had lent a helping hand. They had helped Wen Shan get through the crisis. However, no one had expected that Wen Shan's branch would be destroyed by Zhang Bingsheng, one of their own. Although Zhang Canwen had escaped, where could a heavily injured and dying person escape to? After more than 10 days of searching, perhaps old Zhao still had hope when he left. However, I knew how cruel reality was. Zhang Canwen had most likely met with misfortune. I sighed and held the yin-yang yama brush in my hand. I recalled what old Zhao had said before he left. He had said that he would give me the yin-yang yama brush. However, it was the inheritance of Wen Shan's branch. How could I dare to take it for myself? After thinking for a while, I called Xie Chenghua, Lu Chuanda, and Wang Kuan over. I arranged for them to continue searching for Zhang Canwen in Meizhou and the surrounding areas. It would be best if we could find Zhang Canwen's whereabouts. I will return the yin-yang yama brush to him and do my best to help him rebuild the Mount Wen lineage. If I really can't find Zhang Canwen, I'm not a pedantic person. I'll take the yin-yang yama brush for my own use, but at the same time, I'll also promise Lord Zhao and his 2 disciples that I'll kill Zhang Canwen to comfort their souls in heaven. Zhang Bingsheng is only a quasi-meridian talent, and his strength is only in the early stages of glory of consciousness. His strength is not much different from Chairman Su, Xie Chenghua, and the others, and they are all at the weakest level of glory of consciousness. Even without Tong Tong and Xie Chenghua's help, I alone have the strength to fight him. It was better to take revenge as soon as possible. Moreover, the Lu family was here as well. Although I don't have the strength to go to Beijing to find Lu Jinyang and challenge the entire Lu family, since they came to Guangdong, they can't blame me for collecting some interest. As I arranged for everyone to continue searching for Zhang Canwen, I went alone to the Meizhou branch. I quietly waited at the entrance for an entire day. In the evening, I saw a person in the middle stage of the pressure point realm come out from inside, so I quietly followed him. When I arrived at a secluded place, I casually used a binding talisman to restrain him and brought him back to the hotel I was staying at. A person in the middle stage of the pressure point realm was enough to hold the position of a director or a vice chairman in any of the metaphysics branches. After a series of interrogation, this person very quickly revealed Zhang Canwen's residence address and his whereabouts over the past few days. According to what he said, Zhang Canwen rarely appeared at the Meizhou branch. It was only 10 days ago that he and Lu Qingping came to the branch and gathered all the members of the Meizhou branch to investigate the relationship between Zhao Dingwu, Zhang Canwen, and the others. After the Lu family killed the Mount Wen lineage, they didn't hide their tracks. Most of the people in the Meizhou branch knew of Lu Qingping and the others. Calculating the time, his investigation was most likely triggered by me killing Lu Zifeng and rescuing Lord Zhao. I didn't know if his investigation would lead to me or not, but it didn't matter. The Lu family and I were mortal enemies. It didn't make a difference whether or not it was one more thing. Apart from this, Zhang Canwen appeared again yesterday. This time he was alone. After arriving at the Meizhou branch, he gathered over 10 people in the pressure point realm and set up a spirit summoning array in the Meizhou branch. The spirit summoning array was originally very simple. Even when I hadn't reached the Earthmaster realm, I could still rely on some metaphysics tools. With Jean Canwin's cultivation, he only needed a talisman to summon a soul. The reason why he set up the spirit summoning array was because he wanted to summon Jean Canwin's soul. The spirit summoning technique was the same as the soul searching hand seal. The caster could only use it on people whose cultivation was lower than their own. If it was used on people with similar or higher cultivation, they wouldn't be able to use it. Of course, metaphysics had its own ways to adapt. The spirit summoning array was a method to gather everyone's power to summon the soul of a powerful person. Jean Canwin was at the middle stage of the glorious memory realm. On Jean Canwin's side, Liu Champing, who was the strongest, was also at the same realm. It was impossible to use the spirit summoning array on him. Under such circumstances, the only way to summon a soul was to set up the spirit summoning array. Speaking of which, I was lucky. The person I had randomly kidnapped was one of the feng shui masters who had set up the spirit summoning array yesterday. That was why he knew so much inside information. However, after knowing this news, my heart sank. Under most circumstances, the soul would only leave the body when it was about to die. The spirit summoning technique was only effective on dead people. Since Jean Canwin wanted to summon Jean Canwin's soul, did that mean that Jean Canwin was already dead? Before I could figure it out, the person told me that the spirit summoning array had been set up for an entire day, but in the end, it failed. It didn't summon Jean Canwin's soul at all. After listening to him, I understood that Jean Canwin had set up the spirit summoning array. Although it was called the spirit summoning array, it was actually to confirm whether Jean Canwin was still alive or not. If he couldn't summon his soul, there were only two possibilities. Either Jean Canwin's soul was imprisoned somewhere after his death, or Jean Canwin wasn't dead yet. Moreover, considering the fact that Jean Canwin had escaped from their ambush, it was more likely that he was still alive. After understanding this, I felt much better. As long as he was still alive, everything was fine. At first, I just wanted to get Jean Canwin's address so that I could secretly attack him. I didn't expect to get a surprise. After restraining the person again, I sat on a nearby chair and frowned, contemplating. If Jean Canwin wasn't dead, should I put aside the matter of taking revenge and try my best to find Jean Canwin before Jean Canwin? After thinking about it for a while, I shook my head. Searching for people was too random. Even if I tried my best to find them, it was hard to say what the result would be. In order to ensure Jean Canwin's safety, I should make a move on Zhang Bingcheng as soon as possible. As long as I killed Jean Canwin, it didn't matter if I could find Jean Canwin or not. He would be much safer. If Jean Canwin died, Liu Qingping would be the only outsider left. No matter what, he wouldn't be able to continue searching for Jean Canwin. However, there was a disadvantage to doing so, which was that it would easily alert the enemy. After Jean Canwin died, Liu Qingping might feel that he couldn't do anything and leave Meizhou. If that was the case, I could only put aside the matter of taking revenge on the Liu family. After careful consideration, I decided that it was more important to ensure Jean Canwin's safety. There was no rush to take revenge on the Liu family. Furthermore, Liu Champing was in the middle stage of glorious memory and was also a prodigy of the Liu family. He might have some life-saving items on him. In a situation where I wasn't fully prepared, it would be too difficult to kill him. After confirming it, I rested for a bit before heading to Jean Canwin's house. Although Liu Qingping was with Jean Canwin, it was unlikely that he would stay at Jean Canwin's house. Thus, to kill Jean Canwin, it would be the best time when he was sleeping at home. When I set off, the sky was already dark. When I reached Jean Canwin's house, it was in the dead of night. Jean Canwin also lived in a small courtyard, but it was different from Zhao Dingwu's house. This was a proper villa district. There were rows of 3-story villas that looked pleasing to the eye. According to that person's confession, Jean Canwin's house was in the middle of villa number 6. I hid in the shadows by the wall and sneakily made my way to the fence of villa number 6. With a nimble flip, I jumped into the courtyard. Then, I used the dark green power to hide my presence. I snuck to the base of the wall, closed my eyes, and sensed carefully. Very quickly, I felt an extremely strong Tao energy wave from the second floor of the villa. From the aura, it looked like the early stage of glorious memory. It was most likely Zhang Kanwen. Chapter 222. There was no light in the dark night, but under the effect of Dao Qi, I could see the situation in the room clearly. On a large, extravagant bed, a middle-aged man in a nightgown sat cross-legged. He wasn't sleeping, but was meditating instead. The Dao Qi fluctuations on his body were very obvious. This surprised me. Zhang Bingqing's talent was extremely poor. He was barely at the early stage of glory of knowledge. He couldn't even compare to his nephew, Zhang Kanwen. Up until now, he was only half dead in his position as the president of the Meizhou branch. I thought that people like him would have no desires and just eat and wait for death. I didn't expect him to be so hardworking. He was sitting alone on the bed in the middle of the night and cultivating. However, it made sense. If he really had no desires, he would have colluded with the Liu family and attacked his fellow sect members. However, it was impossible for me to launch a sneak attack. When a feng shui master was meditating and cultivating, their spiritual senses were at their sharpest. Even if I had the dark green energy to hide my presence, I would have to break the window if I wanted to enter the room. It would inevitably cause a commotion, so it was impossible for me to not alert him. However, it didn't matter. I had already sensed that there was no one else in the three-story villa besides Zhang Bingqiang. He was merely at the early stage of one meridian glory of knowledge. It wouldn't be impossible for him to attack. With that thought, I extended my hand and pressed on the window. With a slight force, the window shattered and a large hole appeared. At the same time, Zhang Bingqiang, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, suddenly opened his eyes and jumped up from the bed. He looked at the side of the bed warily. I extended my hand to clear the glass shards by the side of the window before jumping in. I looked up at him and asked, "You are Zhang Bingqiang?" Zhang Bingqiang looked at me with a malicious gaze. He didn't answer, but asked in reply, "You are the person who killed Fifth Master Liu a few days ago and stole the inherited instrument of Wen Shan's lineage?" I smiled. I don't know who Fifth Master Liu is, but I killed Liu Zifeng and saved Old Master Zhao. Zhang Bingqing's gaze darkened, but I didn't see any fear. Instead, he jumped off the bed and looked up at me. He asked with a faint smile, "So, you are Zhou Yi, right?" His abrupt words startled me. I thought that they wouldn't be able to find out my identity so quickly. I didn't think that they would find out so quickly. Seeing my silence, Zhang Bingqiang smirked evilly. "It's really you. These days, I've investigated all the relationships between Zhao Dingwu and his two disciples. Zhang Kanwen and the other two were with you a few days ago, and you defeated several people in the glory of consciousness realm in the metaphysics exchange competition between Guangdong and Nanyang. You have this kind of strength, and you seem to have a grudge against the Liu family. It looks like you have all the conditions, but I'm still a little curious. You're just a junior in the touch of acupoint's realm. Why are you interfering in this matter? Are you tired of living?" I raised my eyebrows and looked at Zhang Bingqiang in shock. Since he knew that I had defeated several people in the glory of consciousness realm and killed Liu Zifeng, he should know that I had the ability to kill those in the early stages of the glory of consciousness realm. Why was he so confident in his words? Uneasiness rose in my heart. I stood still and quickly used my Tao energy to sense the surrounding situation. After realizing that there was nothing abnormal, I heaved a sigh of relief. I looked up at Zhang Bingqing again and sneered. "I should be the one asking you this. You were raised and supported by Old Master Zhao since you were young, and you're related to Zhang Kanwen and his brother. You colluded with outsiders to destroy your own sect and did so many evil things. Are you tired of living and purposely attracted the wrath of the heavens?" Zhang Bingqiang smiled in disdain. "Wrath of the heavens? Zhao Dingwu messed up the sect. He's just a cripple, but he didn't pass the sect's inheritance to me. Instead, he held it in his hands for dozens of years. He ignored the 1,000-year-old tradition of Wen Shan and casually dealt with the inheritance. If we're talking about wrath of the heavens, He's the one receiving wrath of the heavens. He was no longer calm. His voice was ferocious as he coldly said, "Of course, he has already received the wrath of the heavens." I shook my head. Old Master Zhao was right. Jealousy and greed had completely twisted Zhang Bingcheng. Without waiting for me to speak, Zhang Bingcheng grinned fiendishly and said, "You ignorant child. You're not a disciple of Wen Shan, but you want to presume the internal affairs of Wen Shan. You only know that Zhao Dingwu has been supporting Wen Shan all these years. But do you know that it was him who killed my brother in order to seize the inheritance of Wen Shan? My father also died of depression because of this news. Fortunately, the heavens have eyes. That shameless thief also destroyed his own cultivation. That's why he didn't succeed in the end. As an outsider, you don't know the truth of the past, but you still fantasize about upholding justice for others. It's really ridiculous." His words made me shake my head again. Although he wasn't wrong, and I didn't know the inside story of the past, I still had the basic ability to judge. Old Master Zhao wasn't a fool. If it was really as he said, to plot against Zhang Bingxian in order to obtain the inheritance of Wen Shan, would he have destroyed his own cultivation and talent in the end? Moreover, after experiencing so many things, would he have given the inheritance of Wen Shan to Zhang Canwen and his brother? Zhang Bingqing's words didn't hold water. I shook my head and took out the yin-yang yama brush. I coldly said to him, "What's right and wrong has its own proof. Today, I've come to kill you. Although you've committed countless crimes, you're still a disciple of Wen Shan. Today, I'll use this inherited magic tool of Wen Shan to take your life." As soon as I said that, Zhang Bingcheng didn't show weakness. He lifted his foot and took a step forward. He raised his hand and also took out a winter sweet branch magic tool. He replied disdainfully, "Ignorant child, do you really think I'm trash like Lu Zifen? Enough nonsense. Hand over your life." As he said that, he threw the magic tool in his hand into the air. In a flash, it turned into dozens of phantoms that attacked me. The dried branch magic tool had several blood-red plum blossoms. Under the continuous phantoms, they formed a blood-red shadow. It looked extremely horrifying. In a flash, I recalled that old Master Zhao had mentioned his master, Dao Ishume. It was likely that Zhang Bingqing's magic tool had been inherited from his father. Zhang Bingqing's arrogant words and the dozens of phantoms had a majestic aura. I didn't dare to underestimate him. I called out Tong Tong while drawing in Dao energy. The yin-yang yama brush in my hand condensed a yin-yang fish that blocked in front of me. I wanted to first block his attack and let Tong Tong find an opportunity to counterattack. Unexpectedly, when the yin-yang fish collided with the phantoms of Zhang Bingqing's magic tool, the incomparably majestic phantoms collapsed at the first contact. It only caused a few ripples on the yin-yang fish. I was stunned. I hadn't expected such an outcome. On the other hand, Tong Tong didn't have any distractions. The 2 black threads in his hand had already been thrown out when we were fighting. At this moment, they were coiled around the dried branch magic tool in Zhang Bingqing's hand. A thick black aura was released from the black threads. In the blink of an eye, it completely covered the magic tool in Zhang Bingqing's hand. Zhang Bingqing was also a hoodlum. He directly threw the magic tool on the ground and reached for an ancient book on his body. He flipped open the book and threw it forward, using it as a shield. Then, he ran in the direction of the door. I was even more dumbfounded. Just now, he had talked big. I thought that I would have to fight a bitter battle tonight. I hadn't expected that in less than a minute, Zhang Bingqing would choose to escape. By the time I reacted, this guy had already rushed to the door. I hurriedly pulled the yin-yang fish to the front of the ancient book magic tool to block it. Then, I shouted at Tong Tong to chase after him. Tong Tong's speed was much faster than mine. With a flash of blacklight, she had already caught up to the door. The 2 black threads in her hands shot out once again, wrapping around Zhang Bingqing's body and pulling him back. However, Zhang Bingqing was not a complete weakling. As his body was pulled back, he formed a seal with his hands and took a step forward. Then, a majestic force rose from the soles of his feet, directly breaking the 2 threads in his pupils and stabilizing his body. However, I had already reached the door. The pure Yangyi fire was already burning on my fingertips. Together with Tong Tong, they blocked Zhang Bingqing's path of retreat. The corner of my mouth raised. Just as I was about to speak, Zhang Chengcheng laughed first. He looked at me in disdain and said, "You really are an ignorant child. Lu Qingping will arrive in half a minute. If you want to kill this old man, you still have half a minute. You could try to kill me before Lu Qingping arrives." What? The smile on my face froze. I focused and sensed carefully. As expected, there was an extremely strong fluctuation of Tao energy that was rapidly approaching. Chapter 223. What should I do? If I planned it carefully and ambushed him, I could fight against Lu Changping, who was in the middle stage of glorious memory. However, I wasn't his match at all. Even with Tong Tong, I couldn't. Only now did I understand that Zhang Bingqing's home was a trap. Ever since I killed Lu Zifeng and saved Old Man Zhao, Zhang Bingqing and Lu Changping had been scheming against me. No wonder Zhang Bingqing lived in such a luxurious villa and didn't enjoy himself, sitting on the bed in the middle of the night to circulate his Tao energy. He wasn't working hard to cultivate, but to search for me. My expression changed several times. There was no hope of escaping, so I could only take it one step at a time. I took out the Golden Light Talisman, Square Heaven Fan, and other defensive talismans and artifacts that I had prepared. I didn't dare to think about attacking when facing someone at the middle stage of glorious memory, so I could only focus on defending. However, at that moment, Zhang Bingqing, who had been using all sorts of methods to stall for time, attacked me. He threw all sorts of talismans and talismans at me to stop me from setting up the defensive formation. He mocked me and asked me why I didn't dare to chase after him. Anger rose in me, and I temporarily stopped. I picked up the Yin Yang Yama brush and attacked him. However, when he saw my actions, he instantly stopped and dodged. He was a real villain. His strength wasn't much, but he could use all sorts of methods to disgust people. He was like a red-headed, green-eyed housefly. Helpless, I could only suppress the anger in my heart and order Tong Tong to kill him while I continued to set up the defensive formation. Half a minute passed in the blink of an eye. When a middle-aged man with strong Tao energy rushed into the room, I had already set up 2 layers of golden light talismans. 2 golden rings completely cover my body. Within the rings, there was also the wild grass hill that the Square Sky Fan had brought out. Apart from that, a small candle flame appeared on my fingertip. It was the powerful pure Yangyi fire. In such a short period of time, I had used so many techniques in one breath. At this moment, the Tao energy in my body had already dried up. I didn't dare to waste any more time. I held the jade bracelet tightly in my hand and desperately absorbed the true dragon's energy. Only then did my pale face regain some color. As for Zhang Bingqing, although he was not very strong, he was still the successor of Wen Shan's bloodline. He had all kinds of tricks up his sleeves. Tong Tong gave it his all, but was still unable to kill Lu Chengping before he arrived. At this moment, we no longer had the chance to kill him. I quickly called Tong Tong back and told her to hide with me behind various defensive measures to recover the power that we had previously consumed. Although the amount of yin qi she had consumed was not much, when facing Lu Qingping, every bit of energy she had would increase her chances of winning. Of course, I wasn't talking about killing him. At this moment, I didn't dare to have such an illusory thought. My so-called chance of victory was just to escape from these 2 tonight. Just as I was desperately trying to recover my Tao energy, Lu Changping was not in a hurry to attack me. Instead, he looked at me with interest and asked with a smile, "You're Zhou Yi, who has a grudge against Xinyang. Not bad. You're only at the pressure point realm, yet you're able to repeatedly defeat Shi Yao. No wonder Xinyang is so jealous of you." I didn't bother to reply to him, but I couldn't help but furrow my eyebrows. It was true that Lu Xinyang was jealous of me, but he was also a member of the Lu family. What did he mean by saying that? Without waiting for me to react, Lu Changping continued, "Our Lu family does not belong to Lu Xinyang alone. Although he is the eldest son, you are very talented. As long as you are willing to join the Lu family, To be exact, you are willing to marry my daughter and swear on your Tao heart that you will never betray the Liu family. I can promise you that the grudge between you and the Liu family will be written off. From now on, we will fully support your cultivation and help you reach the peak of the Celestial Master Realm. Little friend Joe, what do you think? His reaction was far beyond my expectations. Furthermore, it didn't seem like he had said it on the spur of the moment. It was more like he had planned for this long ago. It seemed that the relationship between the branches of the Liu family was rather tense. At that moment, my Dao Qi had recovered slightly. I looked up at him and was silent for a while before replying, "What if I'm not willing?" The smile on Lu Qingping's face grew even wider. He clasped his hand behind his back and said, "Let's not talk about the past between you and Jinyang, but this time you killed my fifth uncle and ruined my Liu family's business. Naturally, you will suffer the pain of 1,000 cuts when you die, and your soul will forever fall into the 9 underworlds after you die. Those who submit will prosper, and those who oppose will perish." What a tyrannical Liu family. The corner of my mouth twitched. What if I don't want to die and don't want my soul to forever fall into the 9 underworlds? In such a desperate situation, perhaps it would be better to pretend to submit to the Liu family and then find a way to escape. However, I was clear that the Liu family would definitely not make such a mistake. Putting aside the fact that they might have other methods, just the fact that Liu Changping made me swear on my Dao heart was not something that could be faked. To swear on one's Dao heart, one had to use the blood of their heart and the sole of their middle finger as a guide to swear a heavy oath. Once the oath was made, if one did anything out of the ordinary, their Tao heart would collapse. Although it wouldn't be fatal, one's cultivation realm would no longer be able to advance for the rest of their lives. Thus, pretending to submit to the Liu family was impossible. Hearing my words, Lu Qingping's expression finally turned cold. He said indifferently, "Our Liu family isn't made up of trash like Liu Jinyang and Liu Zifeng. Since you want to die, I'll grant your wish." With that, he didn't say anything else and raised his foot to walk forward. He heavily stepped on the outermost layer of the golden light divine incantation's halo. The halo of the golden light divine incantation was over 1 meter tall, and it tightly wrapped around my body. Liu Changping was standing on the ground before he raised his foot, and after he landed, he was also standing on the ground. However, the difference was that after he landed, his foot was stepping on the golden halo. Logically speaking, when a person was standing on the ground and his feet were on the halo that was more than 1 meter above the ground, his body should be stretched to an exaggerated degree. However, in reality, Liu Changping still looked like he was standing there straight. This feeling was very strange and contradictory, but this was the profoundness of this Tao technique. What Liu Changping used was the astral steps technique, the compendium of heaven, the era of earth. The astral steps was a profound Taoist technique that could only be comprehended by recognizing the power of the stars. There is a saying in the death scripture, "The 9-star astral steps are the spiritual roots of the 9 heavens, the bright beam of the sun and moon, the master of the myriad of grades." Simply put, this Tao technique was a type of Tao technique that could only be used by a feng shui master in the glory of knowledge realm. Of course, some talented people could vaguely comprehend and use it at the later stages of the pressure point realm. As long as a feng shui master was able to comprehend the astral steps technique, they would definitely be able to advance to the glory of knowledge realm with some obsidian stones. Correspondingly, some feng shui masters who weren't strong enough, even if they advanced to the glory of knowledge realm with obsidian stones, they wouldn't be able to comprehend the power of the stars and still wouldn't be able to use the astral steps technique. Just like President Su, Xie Chenghua, and the rest, as well as Zhang Bingsheng, who was standing at the side. As for me, after reaching the pressure point realm, my Dao Qi increased too quickly. Until now, I still hadn't comprehended the astral steps technique, much less used it. After stepping down, the outer layer of the golden halo shook violently a few times, but it stabilized and didn't collapse. However, Lu Qingping's astral steps didn't only have this one step. He smiled coldly. Before he retracted his left foot, he raised his right foot again and chanted softly, 3 steps to capture the astral steps, 5 traces of you. Following his words, he stepped down again and landed on the outer layer of the golden halo. This time, as his right foot landed, the golden halo let out the sound of metal colliding and collapsed in the blink of an eye. Golden light flashed and directly dissipated, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Golden light god spell, 1 out of 2. My expression was solemn. I flicked my finger, and the pure Yangyi fire on the tip of my finger landed on the remaining golden halo. In an instant, a faint red flame covered the entire golden halo. Although the pure Yangyi fire was an offensive spell, the spell was dead while the person was alive. After the 2 god spells were combined, the defensive power increased tremendously. After doing all that, I took out the remaining golden light talisman on me and guided the Tao Qi to form another golden halo that covered the surface of my body. Originally, I had the intention to fight against Lu Qingping, but after seeing his astral steps, I gave up on such unrealistic fantasies. The only thing I could do now was to rely on the true dragon bloodline's powerful recovery abilities to drag things out. Only then would I have a chance of survival. Unfortunately, I had underestimated the power of the astral steps technique. After Lu Qingping took his second step, he chanted softly again. Heaven and earth intersect, 5 elements choose wonder. After chanting, he lifted his feet again. This time he didn't take 1 or 2 steps, but 5 steps in one go. The first 4 steps were on the golden halo that was covered in a faint red flame. I thought that the combination of the 2 god spells would be able to delay him for a few minutes, but I didn't expect that the flame halo would instantly dissipate under the 4 steps. However, Lu Qingping didn't stop. His last step carried the power of the previous 6 steps. He stomped heavily on the weeds that I had been protecting. The square sky fan that had been able to stop the Jing ghost for a few minutes didn't even last for a second. It collapsed under Lu Qingping's stomp. The power of Lu Qingping's final step hadn't been completely neutralized yet. The remaining power still charged towards the gold light divine incantation that I had just cast. The golden halo around my body shook violently, causing my body to shake. A trickle of blood flowed out from the corner of my mouth. When he finally stopped, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Previously, I had consecutively defeated many glory of consciousness cultivators from the Nanyang sects, and then killed Lu Zifeng. Even Zhang Bingqing wasn't my match, so I couldn't help but look down on glory of consciousness cultivators. However, after meeting Lu Qingping today, I realized that glory of consciousness wasn't as weak as I had imagined. The people that I had defeated before were all extremely untalented and hadn't even reached a single meridian when they sealed their acupoints. Also, I had never seen anyone use the heavenly steps. Those people could only be called fake glory of consciousness. As for people like Lu Qingping, who was extremely talented and had comprehended the true glory of consciousness of the heavenly steps, I was still far from him. However, at this moment, Lu Qingping's expression was no longer as calm as before. He stopped in his tracks and said, somewhat ruefully, "My Gangyu's 7 steps. There are very few people in the glory of knowledge who can block it. I never thought that it would be forcefully blocked by a mere junior like you today. Perhaps I should give you another chance. It is not too late for you to be willing to marry into my Lu family now." I was silent for a long time. I wasn't thinking about his suggestion, but I was stalling for time to recover my injuries and Dao Qi. Even though I didn't think that I had any hope of escaping today, but even if I had to die, I would at least have to use all of my strength. After a long time, Lu Qingping finally seemed to have lost his patience. He lifted his leg and was about to walk in front of me again. However, at that moment, he suddenly stopped and frowned. Seeing his actions, I was stunned. Then, I circulated my Dao Qi and sensed carefully. Very quickly, I sensed a wave of surging Dao Qi from afar. There was actually another practitioner that was rushing over here. Also, from the magnitude of the Dao Qi wave, it didn't seem to be inferior to Lu Qingping's at all. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.